How is that going to affect your Christmas? Are you going to be spending as much money you might have in previous Christmases?
No.
No? What are you going to be doing this Christmas around money?
Really spending as little as possible. There's only two of us in the house at the moment anyway, so we're just going to treat it as a normal day, basically.
Treat it as a normal day, maybe cutting back on some of the luxuries you enjoyed in the past?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
What sort of things are going to be cut back on? What sort of treats?
Fancy food, drink, going out, just staying at home, watching the TV, basically.
Fantastic. I'll let you carry on with your shopping. Let's find some other... Also considering the interest rates. Excuse me, madam, no, not to... Interest rates, the bank is keeping them exactly the same, 5.25, so mortgages won't be going up, but it's not necessarily a good thing. How might that affect your Christmas? Do you have a mortgage, or do you have a little bit of debt that you're considering at the moment going into Christmas?
We do have a mortgage, yes. But
Not interested at the moment, sorry, mate.
Not interested at the moment. Carry on shopping. It's because they've got a big list that they need to fill. Guys, we're just talking about interest rates here because we've got the interest rates that they're going to be staying exactly the same, 5.25. So they're not going up, but they're not going down. The bank is keeping them exactly the same. What might that mean for you guys at Christmas? Do you have?
Yes, I have a mortgage, and the wages aren't going up. It's level, but the wages aren't going up. And I'm a low earner compared to the country because it's just, the money is rubbish. The government needs to get some money together, the working people.
And then what does it mean for you guys at Christmas? Did you say you have a mortgage at the moment?
No mortgage.
I have
the interest rate's pretty good at the moment, so I'm quite pleased with that. The interest rates on like the ISAs and things is very good, so I'm quite pleased with that at the moment.
No, I'm not. I think the working people today, with children and without children, the money isn't there. I can't spend what I used to spend 10 years ago. I haven't got the money. I haven't got it. As simple as that. And I work. And
then, so you're talking about how much you're spending. What about today? Are you going to be maybe spending less than you would usually when you visit a Christmas market?
Yes, exactly that. I have to budget. I have to budget everything now.
And then if you don't mind me asking, what is it that you do for a living? And then how is that?
I'm cooking a residential home.
I bet you make a cracking Christmas dinner though, don't you?
I do, and my residents love it. But the thing is, I just can't, I haven't got the money, what I had 20 years ago. The money isn't there. They haven't kept up with inflation with money.
I think
wages are terrible. Minimum wage, that's what I'm on. It's disgusting. And yet people on the dole and Social Security, I have to go up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work. These people are laid in bed till 2 o'clock. It's not right.
So you'd like more support for people that are currently working?
Yes, exactly, because it's always on about children, they're always on about pensioners. What about us that work?
Yeah.
And we keep this country going. There's
the
no
workers.
Money. The low-class workers, we keep it going.
And then just finally, what is it you're going to be cutting out of? What is it that you won't have on your Christmas dinner table this year, or what presents?
It's not food, because I budget my money wisely, but it's presents. You cannot... I give to charity. I've had to cut that in head this year. I cannot do it. I just can't do it, and I feel terrible.
Thank you so much for chatting to us today, guys, on GB News. We've got a trader in the back that we're going to speak to. Enjoy the rest of your shopping. Just keep following me there. Guys, just because we're going to the back right now at the medieval Christmas market. Hello, sir. Merry Christmas. We've got loads of fantastic things that are being sold, including gems. Chip, hello. How are you doing over there in the background? It goes all the way to the back of this one. Mary Lewigford, but there's somebody that we wanted to speak to because in the back here, Nick is one of the traders that travels all across the country, sometimes going to Europe as well, and he makes a living by relying on people that have money to spend at Christmas. And if we can just go over here, Nick, how you doing? We're just live on GB News right now. The bank rate has stayed exactly the same, so interest rates going down. But that must be good in some way for you that they're not rising it.
Yeah, I think it probably is. We're slaves to the rises and things. I mean, we have seen prices go up on a lot of things. Some surprising things. I mean, spices, some of my spices have more than doubled in price over the last few years. So anything that keeps a certain amount of stability is probably a good thing for us.
What do you think in the reaction to customers, people that would come to your shop, will be this year because of high costs that have been going on for a number of years, but right now are particularly being driven by those high interest rates?
Yeah, well, we've had an interesting last few years with the sort of financial side of things. I mean, whether it's the war or whether it's Brexit or whatever, there's been an enormous amount of uncertainty, and prices have gone up. We're still selling. I mean, we're a luxury. But I think people are still spending. They want something for themselves. They want a little bit of luxury, a little bit of a treat for themselves. They may be spending less on some of the big things, perhaps, but thankfully, we're still in the market.
It's a good market to sell sweet treats, lots of chocolate, all made to recipes that they were making chocolate with 1,000 years ago. Nick, don't go anywhere, because I know you've got about 100 customers coming this way. We're not going anywhere. We're here at the top of every hour, and we're going to be speaking to people from across Lincoln that are coming to this medieval market to talk about those interest rates, inflation, and everything to do with the cost of living.
Oh, well, Will Hollis, thank you so much for bringing us that and the reactions from people, of course, in Lincoln. And just a couple of apologies there. Clearly, the thick medieval walls of Lincoln, wherever it was it Lincoln Cathedral, perhaps, or medieval market? Clearly, signal issues getting through those.
That was brilliant, though. Really got a cross-section of views. Some people who are quite happy with the savings that they're getting on their savings, the interest they're getting on their savings, and others very concerned about the cost of living. But joining us now in the studio is Mark Bogard, Chief Executive of the Family Building Society. So, Mark, we've just received this news that the Bank of England has decided to keep that base rate as it is, 5.25%. Still the highest in 15 years, I believe. What impact is that having?
Well, coming off low interest rates is like coming off a drug, so it was always going to hurt. But it's really interesting because, like everything, there are two points of view. So we're in a really unusual place now. Interest rates are 5.25% and inflation is 4.6%. So if you're a saver, which more of your viewers will be savers at lunchtime than will have a mortgage, they're getting a really good deal, which is what the penultimate lady was saying. Last time that was true was 1948. So
wow.
Personally, I think the bank's got interest rates too high. So if you're a mortgage holder, it's lousy. But if you're a saver, you haven't been in this position since 1948.
That is so interesting, and it was fascinating seeing those two women side by side, one saying, well, I've got savings, this is great, the other saying, I've got a mortgage, this is bad. And I suppose one of the big issues here is that, yes, in terms of historical levels, this is not a particularly high rate. In the early 90s, we saw rates going up to almost 15%. But I suppose it's the speed at which things have changed. People made borrowing decisions based on rates that were very, very low. And now suddenly those rates are, well, 5 times higher, more than 5 times higher. And that's going to affect what people have borrowed, and it could feel like a bigger rise, even though in reality it hasn't been.
So the really interesting thing at the moment is, although interest rates have gone up 14 times, and most people have fixed-rate mortgages, as you come off, that's really going to hurt because your mortgage rate has probably tripled. Actually, bad debts and arrears and repossessions are really low at the moment, and the reason for that, as a building society, if you came to us for a mortgage, till relatively recently, we had to stress the rate to 7.3%. So you had to prove to us that you could afford the mortgage at 7.3%. Mortgage rates have not got to 7.3%. So although it's really hurting and it's sucking money out of the economy, people can still pay their mortgage because they were stressed. So nobody listens and everyone said, oh, it's really low rates and they'll go up, which is what's happened now. But it's not. There aren't repossessions, there aren't bad debts, we're not seeing people
because you did this sort of affordability, rigorous affordability checks when these mortgages were handed out.
And that came as a result of the last financial crash, and that has been a huge success, which no one talks about. So you're not seeing arrears and repossessions, which is what you saw after the crash in 2008.
Yeah, it's interesting you point that out, because a lot of people looking at the interest rate go up so quickly will have been deeply concerned at people not being able to afford their mortgage. But you're saying we're not seeing those repossessions that some might have expected.
No, repossessions are still effectively at historically low rates. And sometimes you see headlines, they've gone up X%, but that's only because they're coming from such a low level.
To what extent is that also to do with the phenomenon now of so many more people having fixed-rate mortgages? Very, very few people have variable rates.
Well, the Bank of England sees this as a sort of academic exercise. It's really interesting. So last time this happened, it wasn't like this at all. the vast majority of people take fixed-rate mortgages, often for 5 years. So this comes through very gradually over 5 years. They've never had to deal with that before, and so academically, they find that really interesting. When I got my first mortgage, almost everyone had a variable rate mortgage. So if mortgage rates went up, that month, it sucked money out of the economy. Now, if you're lucky, rates will have gone up and down. With your 5-year mortgage, you won't contribute to the pain at all. So what's happening is really unfair because it's just a matter of luck. Some people, it's really going to hurt. Other people will get through it and they'll have a slightly higher mortgage rate, but they won't have got stuck with a really high. And the Bank of England's really interested in that because they've never had to do this in that environment.
And the most unlucky of all will be those who perhaps 3 or so months ago took out a fixed-rate mortgage at a very high level. It's why our economics and business editor Liam Halligan perhaps was saying, don't take out a mortgage now. Expectations are that interest rates will probably fall in the coming months.
Well, that's a really hard decision. So I've got a mortgage that comes up on the 31st of December. So you have a choice. You can take a variable rate mortgage if you think rates are going to come down, or you can take a shorter fixed rate mortgage for, say, 2 years. But that is a really hard decision to take. What are you going to go for? I think I will take a 2-year fixed.
Yes.
Because the rates have come down below 5% again. If you go variable, it's a bit more. But that decision is really hard in a falling environment, which is exactly what's happening at the moment.
And it depends on your personality a bit, doesn't it? Whether you want to take a risk or whether you'd prefer to know exactly what you're going to be paying, even if it is higher than perhaps it would be if you took a variable.
There are two views about rates at the moment. One is called tabletop mountain, which is people think rates will be quite high for quite a long time. The other is the Matterhorn, is that because of the pain in the economy, actually, they'll go up and go down quite quickly. So if you take the Matterhorn view, then you should take variable rate and then fix afterwards.
Well, I hope you make the right decision come the 31st.
Just quickly, if we're seeing this sort of delayed effect of the pain because of all these fixed-rate mortgages, might that also mean there's a delayed effect of the benefit of rates coming down? Might it not be the sugar rush that perhaps some people in government might be hoping for? Maybe people won't feel that much better off.
That's true, but a lot of people over the recent period have taken variable rate mortgages. So the people that have taken variable rate mortgages will then, their rate will come down and then they'll be able to fix. So it's not like it was, because if you're a safety first kind of person, then you think, oh, I can afford that, so I'll fix it because then I can sleep at night. But the percentage of variable rates has gone up dramatically over the last 12 or 18 months.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming into the studio. Mark Bogard there, Chief Executive of the Family Building Society. Very interesting indeed to think about the different impact it will have on different people, depending on your financial circumstances.
Absolutely. Well, coming up, the search continues for mother of 3 Gaynor Lord, who's been missing since Friday. We're live on the scene in Norwich after this very short break.
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Now, a witness has claimed that missing mother of three, Gaynor Lord, was doing yoga poses in a park moments before she disappeared.
Norfolk Constabulary have appealed for information, releasing CCTV footage of the last time the 55-year-old was seen before her disappearance on Friday afternoon.
Well, the police continue their search, linking in with the detectives that worked on the Nicola Bulley case to learn lessons from that investigation.
We can now cross to Norwich and speak to GB News national reporter Theo Giacomba, who's been following the investigation. Theo, since we last spoke yesterday, we've seen this CCTV footage, which shows Gaynor appearing to be in a rush, leaving work, and then she was found through the streets of the city centre, looking like she was in a rush, certainly in a bit of a jog. We also know that her clothing has been found in various locations. What's the very latest?
It seems like we might have a little problem there connecting to the audio. We'll see if we can get that set up. But I think it is worth revisiting this CCTV footage. And if we can play this on our screens for those watching on television, it is the most remarkable scene where you see this woman sort of rushing almost through the streets. There, a cobbled street in Norwich, and she's running through the street. I don't think that's an inaccurate description of what's going on. Running through that street and then crossing behind and sort of darting through oncoming traffic, clearly in a rush in this footage. And also sort of continuing to run towards the park. But now this new piece of information of yoga poses in the park, it's not something that someone was... You'd assume someone rushing. Why would they then stop and do yoga?
Yes.
It's all very curious.
So as we understand, an eyewitness saw the missing mother, saw Gaynor Lord take off her coat and start to practice some yoga poses in the park. And I believe, as it stands, that was the last time she was spotted from an eyewitness. But of course, the police are appealing to the public, anyone who might have any information, anyone who may have seen her in the hours after she left her place of work, which of course was a department store. But very interesting that they're getting the police who were involved in the Nicola Bulley case involved to see if they can learn from anything that happened there.
Well, I believe we now have audio connection with Theo Giacomba live from the scene in Norwich. And Theo, what's the latest from the police?
Yes, well, a very good afternoon to you both. So since we last spoke yesterday, we of course saw that CCTV footage which was released of her leaving the city centre after she'd left work around just over an hour before she was due to finish at 4 p.m. and there isn't quite an explanation at the moment as to why that is the case, but subsequently some of her items, some of her clothes were seen in Wensum Park where I am at the moment, and police are particularly focusing on this area as they're working on a hypothesis believing she may have entered the water. Now just behind me we've got the River Wensum here, and police have been going up and down in boats, and some have been working on the land as well just to try and see if they can find any further items. They've been doing that since the early hours of this morning, and of course we did see that specialist dive team which arrived here yesterday. They are now back here again going into the water to see if they can find anything from there as part of their investigations. And as you mentioned, they're working alongside Lincolnshire police. Some of those specialists are working with them here on the scene. And on top of that, they have been in conversation with Lancashire police. As we saw earlier this year, the missing mother of 3, Nicola Bully, was missing for several weeks, and the police were under some sort of criticism, particularly when it came to releasing some of those personal details. But of course, they're working together to see what they learned from their experience earlier this year now. But for now, though, police are still appealing for anyone who may have any footage, perhaps dashcam footage or doorbell footage, that may help them as part of their investigation. We've also heard from some of Gaynor's relatives, particularly her stepbrother, who said this is something they didn't expect to see. It's extraordinary, which has been described by one of the family members, and they're hoping just to get some news from the police as they continue their investigations here in Norwich.
Well, Theo, thank you so very much for bringing us the very latest there. We know we'll be back to you if we see any more developments in this ongoing investigation.
Yes, thank you, Theo. Now, coming up, the hit Netflix series The Crown has released its final series. But is it royally worth a watch? We'll pose that question to our royal correspondent after your latest headlines with Sophia.
Thank you, Emily. It's 12:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has held the interest rate at 5.25% for the third time in a row amid signs of potential economic challenges. It comes as a Monetary Policy Committee had previously raised the interest rate for 14 consecutive meetings until it reached a 15-year high of 5.25%. At Parliament's Treasury Committee last month, the bank's governor said the threat of UK inflation is being underestimated. But the government says it will keep driving inflation out of the economy to reach the 2% target. The Prime Minister prepares to double down for the next stage of the Rwanda bill as Tory MPs remain indecisive. Rishi Sunak's emergency legislation won a vote in the Commons only after 38 Tory MPs abstained. Some MPs call for the bill to be tightened, asking to deny asylum seekers individual appeals. But the government says it will remain within international law. The father, stepmother and uncle of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif have pleaded not guilty to her murder. The 10-year-old's body was discovered at her home in Surrey in August. The day before Sarah was discovered, the 3 defendants left the UK for Pakistan with 5 children before returning a month later. The trial of all 3 will be in September next year. And a second probe into South Wales Police has been launched by a watchdog following a crash in Cardiff. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans died after the bike they were riding crashed in Ely in May. The new investigation is focused on complaints made by the boys' families. It's separate from another investigation into the interactions of officers with the teenagers before their deaths. And you can get more on all these stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Some breaking news now. In the last few minutes, a nurse has been sentenced at Preston Crown Court to 7 years and 2 months in jail over the ill treatment of stroke patients at Blackpool Victoria Hospital.
Our reporter Sophie Reaper joins us now in the studio with the latest. Can you explain this case?
Absolutely. So back in October, we found that Catherine Hudson was guilty of these offences. Today was the sentencing at Preston Crown Court. She basically had been sedating some of the patients at Blackpool Victoria Hospital, essentially, to quote the case, because she didn't want to have to deal with them and because she wanted an easy life. Now, that is, of course, horrendous, and the judge has said that this is a highly unusual case and that it's damaged public trust in the health system, as of course it would. So she's received 7 years and 2 months in prison. Half of that will be served in jail, and then the rest she'll be allowed to do on licence. There's also another nurse, Charlotte Wilmot. She's also received jail time today. She's had 3 years in prison for partaking in this, but also both of them have been charged with theft. They were also stealing drugs from the ward. Catherine Hudson, we heard today, was stealing drugs from a terminally ill patient. So that has added on to her sentence. So it's really quite a horrific thing. And I think in the wake of Lucy Letby, obviously, that damaged public trust a lot. We've now seen more nurses in the North West. It is really just quite horrendous. horrendous.
It is deeply unfortunate that these are two cases that have affected the North West, that are in the North West, to do with deep malpractice in the healthcare sector. I wonder, is this just the tip of the iceberg? Is there more going on across the country, possibly?
Absolutely. I mean, this isn't the first nursing scandal we've seen. They've happened all over the country. It just seems that these two have come so close together that the spotlight really is on the North West. Obviously, we know that a statutory inquiry is taking place regarding Lucy Letby. That has asked trusts all over the UK about potential CCTV on our wards, whether that's necessary now. It's also asked about the culture in our trust, that toxic culture. I mean, the fact that these two nurses have been sedating patients who have had strokes, things like that, just so that they can have an easy life.
How was this found out initially? Do you know? Was there a whistleblower?
Yes. She was working alongside a young nurse, and the whistle was blown against her, and that launched a full investigation to find out more about this. And obviously, thank heavens for that, because these families have come out, and of course they're going to be troubled by this for the rest of their lives, that their family members who we should be able to trust the staff at our hospitals, and evidently that's not always the case.
Absolutely, and this might reap a culture of suspicion and of concern for families and patients,
better a culture of whistleblowing than a culture of cover-up.
Well,
and I suppose that was also a case in the Lucy Letby scandal.
Absolutely. I think that we knew that from the very beginning some of her colleagues had blown the whistle on her and nothing was done. There was a full year where she was allowed to get away with those crimes. And that's another thing that's now being investigated by Cheshire Police. There's a corporate manslaughter investigation going on about the senior members of staff at the Countess of Chester to find out exactly why people were blowing the whistle and yet nothing was done. And that's something that I think is now going to be happening at trusts all over the country to make sure that when someone does raise an issue like this, that it's taken seriously.
Well, thank you very much for bringing us that breaking news. Our reporter Sophie Reaper in the studio with us.
Yes, well, in other news, the popular Netflix series The Crown comes to an end today. Split into 2 parts, the final 6 episodes of season 6 have premiered on the streaming service today.
You're gutted, aren't you?
But it's coming to an end. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. I mean, I know a lot of it is nonsense, of course, and you have to put the health warning on it, but it's good telly.
Yes, well, 7 years, 6 seasons, 3 casts later, you either love it or you loathe it. I haven't tried it, but these final episodes will look at the period following Princess Diana's death, looking ahead to the next generation of royals, including the meeting of Prince William and Princess Catherine. Shall we take a glimpse at the trailer?
Thank you. 3, 2, 1, sir. Thank you. 3, 2, 1.
William, keep smiling, darling.
3, 2, 1.
Having reviewed the data, the pollsters have now presented their findings.
Asked if the royal family were out of touch with ordinary people.
53% said yes.
Well, joining us now to tell us more is our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. And Cameron, this has been a very controversial series, particularly because I think looking back to the 1950s, everyone can see that's sort of right to be dramatised. We're getting very close to the present day now. Big questions about people who are still in the roles, still in senior roles in the royal family.
Yeah, I mean, this series is very much still in living memory, and I think even for our age group in particular, this new 6 episodes are really going to be in living memory, because we're going to have incidents like Prince William meeting Kate Middleton at St Andrews University, the Queen's Golden Jubilee. I remember getting a teaspoon in primary school for her Jubilee in 2002. And then, of course, very sadly, we're also going to be covering the death of the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret, the Queen Elizabeth's sister, as well. And, of course, we have to talk about Prince Harry, don't we, and the controversies of the early noughties with him, including wearing a Nazi uniform, arguments with Prince Charles about drug taking. This is what's in the series, by the way. And Harry complaining that William is always, he's always in William's shadow. So there are some controversies. I don't think it's going to be as bad as the last bit where we had the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, but nonetheless, very entertaining, but take it with a pinch of salt.
It all sounds a little bit too close for comfort. The university days, the controversies over Prince Harry and his departure from the royal working family. I mean, Eesh, controversial.
It is controversial, but I think what we have to remember, and I think perhaps there's a danger, particularly with international audience when it comes to The Crown, because it has a huge audience around the world, remember, that they're going to watch the series and think every single conversations which we see dramatised on Netflix actually happens, which clearly is not the case. We do not know what is said behind closed doors, and there is a danger that people will perceive real-life members of the royal family and form an opinion on them based on what they see on Netflix. So it's a brilliant piece of entertainment, but it's very much a drama based on historical facts than a documentary.
One of the issues I was reading about in this most recent slew of episodes is that the Queen starts to plan her own funeral. The Queen in the series starts to look at her own life and think about her own mortality, which so close to the Queen's actual death in real life really must be done very carefully.
I think it will be done sensitively if we look at how they covered the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. They were actually filming season 6 of The Crown in London on the day Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September 2022, and they actually ceased filming for a short amount of time out of respect. I think it will be done respectfully, as I said, but of course you have to remember that it was already written, I think, at the time that they decided to do this. I think what's more controversial is there's a scene in it, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, I'm afraid, if you haven't seen it yet, where the Queen dreams that Tony Blair is now king. Because he sees the opinion polls. I know. Because he sees the opinion polls of Tony Blair being very popular, and it panics her a bit. So that's probably the most controversial bit of this part of the series.
Goodness me, so they're bringing in the politics.
This is really Tony Blair's wildest dreams. He dreamed about being President Blair of the European Commission and all the rest of it. But my goodness, and I suppose this is, to some extent, this is the argument against republicanism. You know, if we ditch the royal family, you're going to end up with someone like King Tony or President Tony.
Well, I think what The Crown does well is that each series is based on the relationship between the Queen and her Prime Minister of the times. The first season was Queen and Winston Churchill. Of course, this final season is her and Tony Blair. And I think it's really interesting seeing that change in opinion polls and how everything reverts back to perhaps a slightly more popular royal family, because the series ends very happily with the wedding of the then Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, and Prince Charles.
It will be interesting to see, or perhaps amusing, entertaining at least, to see their depiction of the romance between Prince William and Kate Middleton on campus.
And the catwalk as well. So
And
they
the
do that catwalk scene where William says, "Whoa, Kate's hot," because he's not wearing a lot.
Goodness me.
Oh, we're getting a little glimpse there of a raunchy catwalk scene at St Andrews.
If you're watching on radio, this was a charity fashion event at St Andrews University. This actually happened where Prince William was a guest and Kate Middleton then was one of the models wearing an interesting outfit, let's put it that way.
A see-through
Prince
outfit.
William is pretty taken by the
Oh gosh, it's like
Princess
an
of
awful
Wales.
rom-com, isn't it? Thank you very much, Cameron. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent. So there you go. The finale of The Crown is out.
Bit much for a 12 o'clock hour of afternoon
Bit much for Good Afternoon Britain.
Goodness me.
It's more Good Evening Britain. Anyway.
In other news, Blackpool South MP Scott Benton should be suspended from the Commons for 35 days after being caught in a lobbying scandal. That's what the Committee on Standards has recommended.
Now, a Standards Committee report said the MP had given the message he was corrupt and for sale. If MPs approve the suspension, it could lead to a by-election in his Blackpool South constituency and another possible headache for the Prime Minister.
Well, joining us now is the chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti. And Aubrey, let's just go through the details of what Mr Benton was accused of and what this Standards Committee has found him, frankly, to be guilty of.
So Scott Benton has been under investigation really for about 7 months, ever since some undercover Times journalists went to meet him posing as a fictitious company looking to expand in the UK and offering up to £4,000 a month to an MP for their services. Now, during the course of that meeting, Mr. Benton described how he could get access to privileged information, including things like a key government policy paper 48 hours before it was being published. He talked about being able to fix meetings with ministers, waiting outside division lobbies in his role as an MP to be able to sort of corner them and try and bend their ear about things, and even talked about ways that potentially you could circumnavigate the rules around knowing how much MPs themselves have been lobbied. Scott Benton was the chair of the all-party group on betting and gambling, and he said that the threshold, if you like, for which you have to declare hospitality is £300. He said with a laugh how funny it was that sometimes it would come to £295 and therefore you wouldn't need to declare it. The Committee of Standards looked at this, has recommended a very hefty suspension, and has said that he has created a sort of toxic image of Parliament.
A 35-day suspension, in the history of suspensions, how tough is that? Is that quite an extraordinary number of days to be suspended?
It's certainly towards the significantly higher end. I mean, most people look at the sort of threshold of 10 days, if you like. That is the number that has to be passed in order for an MP to potentially face a recall petition and therefore a by-election. So if you sort of pass that benchmark, you're certainly in the significant suspension territory. So going up to 35 days, I think, suggests that the committee that looked at this, which is a cross-party committee with a Conservative majority, really were deeply unimpressed with not just Scott Benton's behaviour at the time, but also his conduct during the course of the 7 months of this investigation.
And just looking at what the next steps are, of course, this is just a recommendation from the Standards Committee. Then there, of course, needs to be endorsement from the House and then potentially that recall petition. Walk us through that timeline.
Of course. So the way it works is that MPs on the committee only make a recommendation. The whole House has to approve it. Now, there hasn't been a vote in terms of a recommendation like this being struck down for over a year now. The last time that happened was with Owen Paterson, when Boris Johnson's government whipped MPs to vote against the suspension. But normally it's sort of done as a matter of course. That MPs understand that their colleagues are delegated to look at this issue very, very closely, take a long time to do so, and so they trust their final verdict. I've not met any MPs that sort of quibble with it yet, and so the next process will be for the government to table a motion, probably not this side of Christmas, and if the motion passes, then there'll be a recall petition set up for a month. Constituents in his Blackpool South constituency, only 10% of them need to sign it in order to trigger a by-election. The whole process could be expedited, though, if Scott Benton decides to step down immediately and of his own accord, so we're still waiting to hear whether or not he would like to do that.
And Blackpool South, if Rishi Sunak does face yet another by-election in that constituency, what's it looking like in terms of support for Labour, the Conservatives? Is it close?
So I've spoken to both the Conservatives and Labour, and they agree that there should be enough numbers both to trigger the recall petition and the by-election and for Labour to take it. Mr Benton won with only a majority just shy of 4,000 in 2019. It had traditionally been a sort of Labour-held seat, so Labour are fully confident that they think they stand a very good chance of retaking it. It is, of course, a totemic part of signalling Labour's march back to power in its former heartlands, and Keir Starmer will be keen to give Rishi Sunak a bloody nose, if you like, in the new year as the Prime Minister sort of struggles to draw a line under his sort of difficult premiership. I should add that there might be one other by-election to throw into the mix. We are going to get the result next week of the Wellingborough recall petition, which is where Peter Bone is the MP. If 10% of voters there have signed the recall petition as well, then we could be looking at a double New Year's headache for the Prime Minister.
Goodness me, it feels like we've had more by-elections this Parliament than quite a long time. Aubrey Alleghetti, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest there. Potentially 2 by-elections, maybe in the spring.
Yes. Goodness me, what a headache for Rishi Sunak. That was Chief Political Correspondent for The Times, by the way, Aubrey Alleghetti. Nightmare territory, really. But we'll see what happens.
But although it could be spun, I mean, likely to lose Blackpool, could he hold Wellingborough? Potentially. There have been by-election holds before, but much more to come on Good Afternoon Britain after this.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Another dull and damp afternoon for the southeast of England. Brighter skies elsewhere, but with blustery showers towards the northwest. We've got a weak weather front moving through. That's bringing a lot of low cloud and some outbreaks of mostly light rain and drizzle, and that will settle upon East Anglia and the southeast for the afternoon. So largely cloudy. Some outbreaks of rain here. Elsewhere, brightening skies after a grey start. Some sunny spells coming through. But for the north and west of Scotland and for parts of Northern Ireland, it will be windy with showers moving in. Now, where we've got the sunny spells in the west, temperatures reaching the double figures, but it will feel on the chilly side towards the southeast where we keep the low cloud, and that lingers for a time into the evening. Later on it does clear and there will be some mist and fog forming across southern and eastern parts of England, South Wales. A touch of frost in places here as well with lighter winds, but with more of a wind further north and thicker cloud moving in, I think it will largely be frost and fog free to begin things on Friday. A bright start for many, but increasingly cloudy across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and some high cloud moving in across England and Wales as well. So not entirely sunny. The best of the bright weather this time will be in the southeast, increasingly wet and windy towards the northwest.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of December. Coming up.
Home Office failure. Less than 1% of those arriving on small boats since 2020 have been deported. That's according to new government figures. All the while, many of the rest languish in expensive accommodation. The cost of the Bibby-Stop home barge has for the first time been revealed at an astonishing £41,000 a day.
Wow, and the search continues. It's been nearly a week since 55-year-old mum Gaynor Lord vanished after leaving work in Norwich. Fresh CCTV footage has been released showing a frantic Gaynor rushing through the city centre, dodging traffic. We're on the scene as the search operation enters its 6th day.
Not another one? Rishi Sunak is braced for yet another by-election as the Parliamentary Standards Committee recommends an extraordinary 35-day suspension for former Tory MP Scott Benton. That is, of course, more than 3 times the amount needed for a recall petition.
Statistic, only 1% of those who have arrived on small boats since 2020 have been deported.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%. That is quite incredible, isn't it?
No, absolutely. New numbers that have come out that really put into scale, that put into context the problems on our borders. And it is extraordinary given that comparable countries seem to be able to deport so many more people, seem to be able to refuse so many more applications. We're going to try and get to the bottom of what is really going on with our asylum seeker. We'll be speaking to a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Tim Lawton, on precisely why this is happening.
Yeah, we'll put that question to him for you. Why have less than 1% been deported? That seems incredibly low, laughably low, really. The government says they are illegal immigrants, so why has only less than 1%? And also, the cost of the Bibby Stockholm barge, £41,000 per day from the taxpayer. That is quite incredible too, so we'll put that to Tim when we get him. But let's get the headlines.
Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I'm Sophia Wenslet in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has held the interest rate at 5.25% for the 3rd time in a row, amid signs of potential economic challenges. It comes as the Monetary Policy Committee have previously raised the interest rate for 14 consecutive meetings until it reached a 15-year high of 5.25%. At Parliament's Treasury Committee last month, the bank's governor said the threat of UK inflation is being underestimated. But the Prime Minister says progress has been made.
I've made a bunch of decisions, making sure that we don't borrow too much money, making sure that we're responsible with the public finances so that we can get inflation down. It doesn't happen by accident, and the contrast is quite clear. You've got the Labour Party saying they want to borrow £28 billion a year on this green spending spree. All that's going to do is push up people's taxes, push up mortgage rates. We want to get them down, and that's why in January we're starting to cut people's taxes as well. That will help put more money in people's pockets starting at the beginning of January. So look, I think we are making progress. There's more to do, but the economy has certainly turned a corner.
2 nurses from Blackpool are facing prison sentences after they were found guilty for sedating patients. 54-year-old Catherine Hudson has been given 7 years and 2 months for drugging patients during work shifts at Blackpool Victoria Hospital. The incidents occurred between 2017 and 2018. Her 48-year-old colleague, Charlotte Wilmot, was found guilty of encouraging Hudson to drug a patient and sentenced to 3 years. Sentencing judge described the healthcare workers as wicked and pure evil. A second probe into South Wales Police has been launched by a watchdog following a crash in Cardiff. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans died after the bike they were riding crashed in Ely in May. The new investigation is focused on complaints made by the boys' families. It's separate from another investigation into the interactions of officers with the teenagers before their deaths. It's the sixth day in the search for a missing woman who was last seen in Norwich city centre. Gaynor Lord was last spotted on CCTV cameras on Friday afternoon. Norfolk Constabulary says it is likely the 55-year-old may have entered the water and underwater search teams have scoured the river. Miss Lord's belongings, including clothing and a mobile phone, were found in a park near her workplace. The head of a lobbying trade association says the findings against Scott Benton show the need for reform of the lobbying system. It comes as the Committee on Standards recommended Scott Benton be suspended for 35 days from the Commons following a lobbying scandal. The Blackpool South MP was filmed offering to leak confidential information to gambling industry chiefs. Mr Benton was secretly being filmed by reporters for The Times, who offered him between £2,000 and £4,000 for 2 days' work. The MP says he didn't breach any rules. The father, stepmother and uncle of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif have pleaded not guilty to her murder. The 10-year-old's body was discovered at her home in Surrey in August. The day before Sarah was discovered, the 3 defendants left the UK for Pakistan with 5 children before returning a month later. The trial of all 3 will be in September of next year. The UK is banning entry for those responsible for settler violence against Palestinians. Foreign Secretary David Cameron says the ban follows similar measures introduced by the EU. It comes as UN figures show settler attacks in the Israeli-occupied West Bank have more than doubled since Hamas has attacked Israel in October. The UK has signed an international treaty with Japan and Italy to develop a new generation of stealth fighter jets. The deal will aim to build military planes with supersonic capability. The headquarters for the Global Combat Air Programme will be based in the UK. The planes will take to the skies in 2035. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK is deeply invested in global security.
It's a really important time for the UK and Japan to work closely together. The world is much more contested now, and we're seeing that with various different conflicts. But it's important that with a conflict in Europe and a conflict in the Middle East, that we don't forget that the Indo-Pacific also needs protection as well. And the United Kingdom takes those responsibilities incredibly seriously.
And a Christmassy challenge from the UK spy agency will see school children across the country put their puzzle-solving skills to the test. GCHQ has launched its annual festive conundrum by sending a snow-covered Bletchley Park Christmas card to more than 1,000 secondary schools. The card includes 7 increasingly complex puzzles and encourages pupils to work as a team to reveal the final festive message. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. Now, we'll be getting to that big migration story in just a moment. But for now, the Bank of England has announced it's holding interest rates at 5.25%. A 15-year high.
Yes, the bank has kept the rate the same for the past 3 decisions now, as Governor of the Bank, Andrew Bailey, stressed that there is still some way to go in policymakers' efforts to drag inflation down, and that policy is likely to remain restrictive for an extended period of time.
Well, let's see what the feeling is out on our high streets and indeed Christmas markets. Will Hollis is at the medieval Christmas market in Lincoln. And Will, what's the feeling on the ground?
Yes, well, I suppose the aim of the Bank of England is to crush that high inflation, not as high as it was a year ago, not as high as it was 6 months ago, but they still want to bring it down from where it's at around 4% down to 2%. And how they're doing that is by keeping interest rates high. But as I've just said, they're not going up. Which is good. It's not necessarily a Christmas miracle. So let's get some reaction to that from the people here at the fantastic St Mary's Lewigsford Church in Lincoln. Let's find somebody to speak to. Let's see if this gentleman... Excuse me, sir, we're just having a quick chat. No, that's all right. Well, listen, you have a fantastic Christmas, sir. I'm sure you've got a big shopping list. Fantastic. Martin, do you mind if we have a quick chat to you? We're just talking about the interest rates. Interest rates have not gone up, but that doesn't mean that they're going down fast. So what does it mean for you as a trader here at the Christmas market?
I'll be really honest, I'm really good at making things to eat, but I've got literally no idea about finances at all in any way, to be honest.
Well, what about people spending money then? Are you expecting it to be a busy year for you as a trader?
I've found that people have been saving the money for what makes them happy. So markets like this, you get people who are hobbyists, they'll come and they'll save the money for the hobby or something that keeps them happy throughout the year. But it's been a tough year for sure.
Yeah, been a tough year. Martin, we'll let you carry on. We know you've got a lot of sales going on. Let's see if this gentleman over here will have a quick chat with us. Sir, we're just quickly chatting about how the business is going. We've got interest rates that are staying the same, not necessarily a Christmas miracle, but I suppose it's good for people that have mortgages and maybe have a little bit of debt. How is it for you as part of the travelling market here in Lincoln?
It's been a tough couple of years, but we carry on doing what we're doing because of the passion and the love, and because Lincoln's an historical town. It's something with a difference, and you know, we try to keep our prices competitive and low. We like to buy from small independent companies rather than big major concerns, and yeah, it's a struggle, but you know, it's our passion, it's our love, so we just keep going.
We've only been open for about an hour, but it's been incredibly busy here. Are people buying today, or do you feel that they may be a bit hesitant to spend their money this Christmas?
No. The difference with our market compared to other markets, we do bring a difference and a bit of history. So people, what they'll do today is they'll come in, look, see what we've got available, because we're open till Sunday. So it's not like a panic rush to buy things. I've had a few, because obviously I run that stall over there, that they come in, browse, and it's like, yeah, I'm interested in that, so maybe I'll be back tomorrow. So
you are open for 4 days. Let's see if we can find some of your customers, tell them where the good stuff is, where the honey is. Thank you very much over there. Let's see who else we can find. There's lots of customers here, about 100 or so people inside right now. Guys, can we just borrow you for 2 moments quickly? Interest rates have just been announced. They're staying exactly the same. That's how they're staying on the bank rate. Are you going to be spending more money or less money this Christmas compared to other Christmases in the last few years?
Probably about the same. Probably about the same, I think, yeah.
Not cutting back on anything this Christmas, cutting back on certain chocolatey treats or anything, or presents for...
The only things we'd be cutting back on is things for ourselves. So, yeah, treats for ourselves we'd probably cut back on in order to be able to still give. But I've always been one for thinking that Christmas is about a lot more than lots of expensive presents. So therefore, you know, I've always been just give what you can, and really Christmas, the greatest present of all.
And so what you're saying is essentially that merriment, that Christmas cheer, that could actually be boosted by having high costs because it brings us back around the table for families.
Possibly, yes, yeah. For me, yeah, I think it sometimes the spirit of Christmas can be lost to a degree, and the spirit of Christmas originally was always about a baby being born in a stable with nothing.
Yeah.
So therefore, that spirit is what goes through, so you can be, for me personally, you can be as merry with very little, which I have been, as you can with more. So it wouldn't really affect me personally in any other way than that.
A really fantastically positive way of thinking about what's going on. Thank you so much for chatting to us, guys. Have a good Christmas. Fantastic. Loads of people here, loads of people celebrating. Do you want us to find a few more for you guys, or do you want to see what else is going on?
Brilliant, very heartwarming stuff from that last lady in particular. Thank you very much indeed. Will Hollis has been bringing us what people actually think out there in the real world from the medieval Christmas market in Lincoln. It looks like people are scrimping on what they buy for themselves in order to be able to give to their relatives and friends. Isn't that rather nice?
Message. And we'll be back with Will, of course, in the next hour as well.
Yes, so Rishi Sunak says there's more work to do, but the economy has certainly turned a corner. That's what he's saying. Well, has it? Our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, joins us now from Westminster. And I suppose, Olivia, at least these rates didn't go up.
Well, absolutely. At least the rates didn't go up. They stayed the same. But of course, it's still at a 15-year high at 5.25%. And that just shows how stubborn inflation is being. Yes, it's halved. That's what Rishi Sunak wanted to achieve, and he has managed to. It's gone from 10.7% last October to around 4% now. So it's actually more than halved. But of course, the Bank of England's target is 2%. So it's keeping those interest rates high in order to try and push inflation down even further. Now, as for the economy turning a corner, Jeremy Hunt managed to put a very positive spin on yesterday's economic figures. Essentially, the figures show that the economy has actually contracted by 0.3%, which is more than economists predicted. They expected a small rise in October, and actually the economy got smaller. But Jeremy Hunt says that we are now ready for the economy to grow. The tax cuts that he put in place in the autumn statement, which come into effect in January, mean that before too long we'll be in a good place for the economy to start growing again. Now, I'm not exactly sure that's what Rishi Sunak meant when he promised that the economy was going to grow at the beginning of this year. We are, in fact, for the whole year, we've been teetering on the edge of a recession. Perhaps next year, when interest rates hopefully at some point begin to go down, inflation continues to fall, and those tax cuts mean a boost to the economy, then maybe we can say that he will be achieving that one of his 5 pledges. But at the moment, it's taking quite a lot of spin from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to persuade us that he has fulfilled that very important pledge of getting the economy growing again.
Yes, and inflation has halved, but it is still quite stubborn, actually, compared to some of our European neighbours, although growth has been stronger in this country, even though it's been pretty poor. But it has been stronger than quite a lot of other countries in Europe where they have actually had a recession.
Amongst the best of a very low base. But, I mean, if you look at all of these European economies together, Britain included, incredibly low growth. Germany teetering on recession. We contracted last quarter, probably not going to be a technical recession. But, I mean, everything in Europe is terrible. Meanwhile, the Americans, 5% growth.
Well, absolutely. And the argument that Conservatives on Rishi Sunak's backbenches are making is that America is growing while other European economies are shrinking is because America has much lower tax than pretty much any country in Europe. There are those on the left who say that if you try and cut taxes, then you'll just see inflation rise. But there are plenty on the right who say that cutting taxes is actually the only way to get the economy growing again. Jeremy Hunt obviously announced some big swathing cuts to a few types of business tax in the autumn statement, and of course that all-important cut to national insurance. So maybe that'll mean that the economy gets moving again. But as you say, it's a bad picture all across Europe. And as Rishi Sunak reminded us at the COVID inquiry earlier this week, one of the big reasons for that is because we are just living through the after effects of locking down the entire economy, essentially shutting down the whole economy for the best part of 2.5 years.
Well, there is that. Thank you very much indeed, Olivia Rutley, our political correspondent, live from Westminster. You know, I have a theory that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt were spooked by Liz Truss and her mini-budget and the way that went with Kwasi Kwarteng at the helm of the Treasury. And they're fearful of acting in a bold way. But I'm thinking, this is my theory, thinking, this is what I would like to see. We've got a general election coming quite quickly. The clock is ticking. They may as well throw the kitchen sink at growth and just make some bold reforms now, see what happens, because we need growth and it's been stagnant for far too long.
You know, you're completely right, Emily, to say reforms, because it's not just about tax. And the Growth Commission that was convened by Liz Truss after she left office did this big report at the time of the budget, which said, yes, there are certain taxes that we need to cut, but some of the biggest roadblocks to growth are regulatory, and particularly refer to how hard it is to build stuff in this country. Changing how we get building and changing how we regulate our own companies as well could be the key. But,
yes, it would help if it didn't take decades to build a train line or decades to get a housing development off the ground.
Yes, the most remarkable thing that I saw recently, there's a proposed tunnel to go underneath the River Thames, out east. The planning application alone for that tunnel is into the hundreds of millions of pounds before a single spade has hit the ground, the planning application, all the lawyers, all the paperwork, all of the environmental assessments has run into over £100 million.
You can make a killing being a lawyer in this country. There is so much work, particularly when it comes to local government as well, and of course immigration policy too, which we're going to get on to very shortly. But coming up, because we've seen that only 1% of small boat arrivals have been deported since 2020. That is a crazy figure. We're going to put that to an MP very shortly. But we have the latest next on the missing Norfolk mum, Gaynor Lord. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 1:23 on Good Afternoon Britain. Very shortly, we'll be discussing our lead story that less than 1% of those arriving on small boats since 2020 have been deported. We're going to be joined by Tim Loughton MP in the next half hour, and I just want to put the question, why? Why less than 1%? It seems incredible to me.
Especially when you compare it to many European countries that manage to actually deport a significant proportion of their own illegal migrants. There's clearly something going wrong, something getting bunged up in the whole process, and clearly quite a lot of lawyers making quite a lot of money in the process.
Well, yes, what's going on in the Home Office, that's what we want to know, but also £41,000. That's the cost per day for the Bibby Stockholm barge, which is only currently at 60% capacity. We had the tragic news of someone dying on a barge as well. And that's 22.5 million, I believe the contract is. It's a huge amount of money. Is it worth it? We'll also put that to Tim in the next half hour.
But in the meantime, a witness has claimed that missing mother of three, Gaynor Lord, was doing yoga poses in the park moments before she disappeared.
Yes, Norfolk Constabulary have appealed for information. They've released CCTV footage of the last time the 55-year-old was seen before her disappearance on Friday afternoon. There she is running through the city centre.
Cameras in the shop where Gaynor was working show her shortly before she left, appearing to be smiling.
The police continue their search, linking in with the detectives that worked on the Nicola Bulley case to learn lessons from that investigation.
Well, we can now cross to Norwich and speak to the GB News national reporter Theo Chicomba. And Theo, what's the very latest from the police?
Yes, well, a very good afternoon to you. So at the moment, investigations are still ongoing. So just to my left, just off camera, there are several police officers who've been going through the bushes, they've been going through various areas of the park, and they've been doing that since the early hours of the morning. And just over my left shoulder, you may be able to see an orange boat which some officers have been using to go up and down the river since the early hours of this morning. But at the moment, there seems to be no signs of any updates at the moment. But the police, Norfolk Police, are appealing to anybody in the area who might have been around on Friday and, of course, the following days. They're asking if people can share with them any footage they may have which might help them in their investigation, and of course that CCTV footage.
OK, unfortunately Theo's line isn't so good there, very quiet indeed. I think we can't really hear him very well, but we're looking at the CCTV footage from Norwich. As you can see in the corner there, Gaynor Lord, the 55-year-old woman who has gone missing since last Friday, she seems to be walking up a hill there. Previously she was crossing roads.
Quickly, dodging traffic, rushing about. She seems to be walking with quite some purpose and quite some speed. And there is this cobbled street in Norwich where she's running through the street towards the direction of the park. It's all very curious because at one moment she's running, another moment she's sort of in a rush across the road, dodging traffic as she goes, not waiting for those lights. But then this witness saying she was doing yoga.
And the one theory by the police was that she may be in the river. Of course, they've been looking for her since Friday, I believe, or at least that is when she disappeared. How long it will take to find her, we don't know, but the police are, of course, appealing to anyone who may have any footage, who may be an eyewitness, who may have seen Gaynor Lord at some point on that Friday, so they can try and find some more leads, some more clues to where she may be. But a very curious case.
We've re-established this line to Theo now. Let's just get a bit more detail on what the police are up to and what they perhaps have what their suspicions are as to what has happened in this mysterious case.
So their working hypothesis remains that she may be in the water, hence why they're continuing to search this area. So this park, Winston Park, just on the edge of the city centre here in Norwich, has been closed off to the public since last week, and it remains the case as they continue their investigations. They've been searching all through this area in the park, taking anything they find which may help them as part of their investigation. But we are potentially going to hear from the police this afternoon who may have further updates. But from this morning, they have been back in the water. That specialist team they've been working with Lincolnshire Police as well are back in the water. They've just left the water a few moments ago, I think, just to get some kit which they've left in the van, which is in the middle of the park. But they have been working throughout the morning, and indeed, like we may see similar scenes like yesterday. They were working into the night, but for now, though, it seems as though the investigation isn't over there, and they'll be continuing until they find answers.
Theo, did you say the police were going to be speaking to the press later this afternoon? Is that what you said?
Yes, so potentially they'll be speaking to the press this afternoon, we have been told, and we've been issued potentially a time this afternoon, so we may be hearing from the police, but what they will say, they haven't given any heads up on that at the moment.
Well, Theo, we'll be right back to you when they do make that statement, and thank you very much for providing the updates in the meantime.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, today is the 7th day of Hanukkah, and in communities across the UK, people have been coming together for the celebration.
But with the Israel-Hamas war ongoing and increased anti-Semitism reported across the UK, how are communities feeling? Well, our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, has gone to find out more.
Across the UK and around the world, Jewish communities are celebrating Hanukkah. Whether it's the nightly lighting of the menorah or special prayers and fried foods, the Festival of Lights is a chance for people to come together. Here in the West Midlands, members of the Chabad Solihull and Solihull Shul gathered on the first night of the celebration. Watching on and protecting the event were members of the police, a reminder of the increased hostility towards Jews in the UK. In the 60 days after the Hamas terror attack on Israel, the Community Security Trust recorded at least 1,890 anti-Semitic incidents across the UK. That's the highest ever total reported across a period of that length since the start of records in 1984. Organiser of this event, Rabbi Pink, says it's heartening to see a community proudly identify with their heritage.
At a time when so many people are terrified due to the rampant anti-Semitism that's going on around the world, it's extremely heartening to see so many people come out, stand proud to identify as Jews and be proud of their heritage. When people come to you with irrational hatred, hiding your identity isn't the answer, because they're not going to hate you any less. Let's be proud of our identity. Let's demonstrate that we're not going to be cowed by intolerance. We're going to stand proud and share our message of love and kindness with the entire world.
The story of Hanukkah is that after the Jews defeated the Syrian Greeks, persecuting them in the 2nd century BCE and reclaimed the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, they lit the temple's menorah, and a one-day supply of oil lasted 8 days. But as people gather here to watch the ritual, the situation in Israel today brings a different meaning to Hanukkah this year.
I've got a lot of friends and family in Israel. One of my friends posted today that in her house they are lighting, they have 2 menorahs. They have one that they're lighting and one that they're not for all the hostages. And it's a time to remember, you know, that there are people that can't light their menorahs this year and can't be with their families. It's very important.
So it's bringing people who are religious, not religious, whatever, this symbolism of survival, of giving light to everybody and receiving light is a feel-good factor. And it brings everybody together, strangers in the street, not just family. It's not like a sit-down Christmas lunch. It's 8 days, not even the week, which is 7 days. It's one extra day to go that extra mile.
For many Jewish families across the world, this Hanukkah will be one for remembrance, with the hope the candles on their menorah can bring light into their darkness. Jack Carson, GB News, Solihull.
Well, a happy Hanukkah if you're celebrating the religious holiday. But coming up, only 1% of migrants who have arrived on boats have been removed from the UK. We'll be discussing that with our panel, as well as MP Tim Loughton. We'll be asking him why. Why is the Home Office failing to deport, well, more than 1% of those who are arriving on small boats? But let's get the headlines.
Thank you, Emily. It's 1:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has held the interest rate at 5.25% for the 3rd time in a row, amid signs of potential economic challenges. It comes as the Monetary Policy Committee had previously raised the interest rate for 14 consecutive meetings, until it reached a 15-year high of 5.25%. At Parliament's Treasury Committee last month, the bank's governor said the threat of UK inflation is being underestimated. But the government argues progress has been made. 2 nurses from Blackpool are facing prison sentences after they were found guilty of sedating patients. 54-year-old Catherine Hudson has been given 7 years and 2 months for drugging patients during work shifts at Blackpool Victoria Hospital. The incidents occurred between 2017 and 2018. Her 48-year-old colleague, Charlotte Wilmot, was found guilty of encouraging Hudson to drug a patient and sentenced to 3 years. A second probe into South Wales Police has been launched by a watchdog following a crash in Cardiff. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans died after the bike they were riding crashed in Ely in May. The new investigation is focused on complaints made by the boys' families. It's separate from another investigation into the interactions of officers with the teenagers before their deaths. It's the 6th day in the search for a missing woman who was last seen in Norwich city centre. Gaynor Lord was last spotted on CCTV cameras on Friday afternoon. Norfolk Constabulary says it's likely the 55-year-old may have entered the water, and underwater search teams have scoured the river. Miss Lord's belongings, including clothing and a mobile phone, were found in a park near her workplace. A man facing charges in the US can be extradited from Scotland after judges refused his appeal. Nicholas Rossi is wanted in the US for allegedly raping a woman in 2008. He was arrested in Glasgow in 2021, but claimed it was a case of mistaken identity and that he was an Irish orphan called Arthur Knight. After a long legal battle, he'll now be transported to the States to face the charges against him. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2700 and 1.1637 euros. The price of gold is £1,604.39 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,674 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Let's talk now about those shocking figures released today that less than 1% of those arriving on small boats since 2020 have been deported from the United Kingdom. Is this a major Home Office failure, or is this what the system is designed to deliver? Well, joining us now to discuss this and more is the author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe and Novara Media's contributing editor Michael Walker.
Well, yes, it's been revealed to the Home Affairs Committee that the Home Office hasn't particularly been doing a good job across a number of different metrics, Emma. We've got this news that only 1% of migrants who have arrived in small boats since 2020 have actually been deported. There's also the cost of the Bibby Stockholm barge has been revealed, and it is quite astonishing. £41,000 per day is what it's costing the taxpayer, £22.5 million contract. What's going on in the Home Office, Emma?
What's not going on in the Home Office? I mean, you can't really... I see Sunak trying to spin this, but there's really no way to spin it. There's just the record speaks for itself. Less than 1% of people removed from those small boats. And when you take out non-Albanian small boat crossings, that's 99.6% of migrants crossing on small boats across the Channel who haven't been removed.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we
just
get
over 1,000 of the 112,000 people.
We get harsh rhetoric from the government, don't we, Michael? But it seems like they're far better at the Home Office anyways, far better at dishing out the visas than it is about deporting anyone who arrives illegally.
Well, I think the rhetoric's the important thing to focus on here. And I mean, this is the issue
really?
where...
Not the stats?
Well, no, I mean, the rhetoric in terms of the difference between what we're seeing them saying and what they're doing. So I think whether left, right, whether pro-migrant, anti-migrant, the thing that everyone agrees on is that the Home Office isn't fit for purpose and doesn't work very well. And I think this is potentially a story about austerity, because you had cuts to the Home Office of 25%. What happened? It took much, much longer to process people's claims. So I looked it up earlier. So 20,000 people, that was the backlog in 2010. By 2022, it was 170,000 people. So that's the people who are waiting for their claims to be processed. Now, that's not just because of an increase in numbers. So actually, the record number of people who came in a single year as asylum seekers was in 2002. And we didn't get this crisis then because we had a state that actually worked a little bit better because it hadn't been cut to the bone. So I think this is a story really about inefficiency and how we have a Tory government that for a very, very long time has liked to sound as if it's very tough on migration, but actually its policies don't make any sense.
I don't think it's just austerity. I think it's also ideology. We know we've had leaks from the Home Office, people saying we've had no intention of really taking migration seriously. We're never going to put these policies into action. So,
but why would that have changed since? Because I suppose what I'm saying is that there's been a change since the New Labour years and the Tory years, and I don't think it was that people got more liberal. I think it's that the system stopped working.
Might it be that there is a deliberate policy here? There was a fascinating interview with Robert Jenrick when he was Migration Minister about 6 months ago, where he was asked, why don't you speed up processing? And he says, well, you might not want to speed up processing because it would encourage more to come. Might it be that the government has actually perhaps deliberately slowed down processing, deliberately had lots of people languishing in those backlog queues, simply because if they ran too efficient a system, they believe that's a magnet?
But it depends on what kind of situation you put people in when they're in a backlog. If they're able just to live in this country and live their lives, that's one thing. Then it would encourage people just to come over and sit in that backlog forever. But if people are actually being kind of detained forcibly or put on the Bibby Stockholm or whatever, it depends what you do, what your whole setup is.
It does seem that there is this odd sort of thing, though, Michael, that the United Kingdom has signed up to all of these treaties that, in many ways, the United Kingdom helped set up in the wake of the Second World War, at a time when international migration was much, much lower than I think it could even ever be thought to be now. And according to those treaties, millions and millions and millions and millions of people around the world have the right to move to the UK. Now, the UK doesn't want to withdraw from those treaties, so it just wants to frustrate the process of that moving. And it seems like there's this sort of odd... Like, on the one hand, there's these legal obligations, but on the other, the way to try and prevent people moving is not to ditch the legal obligations, it's just to make things awful and tricky.
Well, I think you were onto something before when you were talking about there being a vested interest in not getting rid of these backlogs, in not making these decisions quicker. And I don't think that's as a deterrent, because it's quite difficult to deter people from coming. I think the way to deter people would to essentially turn everyone back. Now, there's massive legal problems with that, massive moral problems with that. Sending a few people to Rwanda isn't going to do anything. Yes. And holding up people for years or 2 years at a time also isn't going to deter people, because people are leaving desperate situations. So I think they've actually created this crisis because they want us to be talking about migration. People keep saying, why is Rishi Sunak talking about stopping the boats when he can't do it? It's because he doesn't want to talk about the NHS. He doesn't want to talk about interest rates. He doesn't want to talk about anything else because he knows that people really hate it.
I might agree with you on that, were it not for the fact that we've heard the Home Office considering an amnesty to those who've come from certain countries. We've also heard of interviews at the Home Office for asylum claims being cut drastically to hasten the process. So where does that fit in with that theory?
Well, you could say it's now got to its limit, right? So they need to be seen to be getting down the backlog. So what they said, we're getting down the backlog. You created the backlog, right? So I think they have, and this is where, you know, I get very cynical about the government, almost conspiratorial, where I think they've almost concocted this crisis because they would prefer to fight the next election on migration than on the economy.
No, the reason he's talking about it is
that is an argument against that. Sorry.
A, because it's easy to make pledges. You can make 5 little neat pledges, put them on a headstone, put them on a card, hand it out, whatever. You make the pledges and then you go, uh-oh, haven't met any of them. Or, oh, they weren't pledges, they were kind of aspirations. Secondly, he's talking about it because it's a massive voters issue. I think it's going to be an election. This is what people care about. So he responds to it and then they can't follow through.
And yet in 2015, the Conservative Party started talking a lot about migration in 2013, 2014. They then had advisers come in as the long campaign for that 2015 election took off that advised them to stop talking about migration because it was driving voters not to the Conservative Party, but it was driving Conservative voters to then UKIP. Yeah. And I wonder if the same thing is happening now. The more Rishi talks about stopping the boats, it's not making people think, oh, this is the guy that we need to stop the boats. It's making Conservatives think these boats are a real problem and they're finding other parties on the right.
Well, I don't know. I think people know it is an issue, don't you?
They do, and they really care. People really do care about this now. And yeah, they have sort of... It's chicken and egg, isn't it? They're feeding the kind of immigration beast. It's very visible. We talk about small boats because that's the visible problem. You can stand on the cliffs and talk about the boats coming in, whereas, you know, you don't talk... We can't see the 600, 700,000 net migration people coming in. We just feel it all around us.
But isn't it interesting that we don't feel loads of Ukrainians? We don't feel loads of people from Hong Kong. I don't sort of walk down the street and see loads of people of Chinese origin. Like, I mean, it doesn't feel like there's been hundreds of thousands of Hong Kongers, but there have.
I think in some areas, say if you're in a university town, you might notice, you know, a lot of students, for example. Or if you're down on the coast, I have friends who live down on sort of Kent coast, and they do talk about a lot of immigrants coming to those areas. So I think it depends where you are. You know, London is maybe a bit more dispersed.
Michael Stephen's written in, and he says there's one reason why the backlog is so long. Decisions are made regularly enough, but the problem is lawyers. The appeal process is used and used and used until it's exhausted. So is it that once they're in the system, it's very hard to actually deport someone, even if they don't really have a genuine asylum claim, because there are just so many legal hurdles to go through, and that's what the government is trying to, at least, curtail in one way or another.
I mean, I think this is one of those situations where, again, we need to look at what's changed. So, as far as I know, there aren't any significant laws that have come in since Labour were last in government. What's happened is that we've defunded the Home Office, and so everything is completely dysfunctional. And obviously, if you're a lawyer, what you want to find is a hole in the case of the Home Office official. And if you've got a bunch of... I mean, I think one of the big problems in the Home Office was that in basically all departments, their initial cuts was by giving people voluntary redundancy. So they say, do you want to go? We'll give you a leaving package. What does that do? It means that anyone with any experience in every department leaves, and then 5 years later or 6 or 7 years later, they realise, oh, God, we've got to hire a load more people because suddenly this backlog is built up, and then everyone in the department is new. So I think you've probably got a lot of Home Office officials, putting together very bad cases which are full of holes, and that's why it gets sort of tied up in the courts for years.
Well, let's pause this one here because there are more stories to get through, notably a very, very concerning story that we've seen in the nation's capital.
Yeah.
That is on the London Underground. There was a horrific sexual assault, a rape, that took place in front of a crowded tube train. There's an article here about it that says man who raped woman in front of other passengers on London Underground jailed. But the most astonishing thing perhaps here, Emma, is that it took a French tourist to be the only person to report this.
Didn't intervene, reported it, but that's better than nothing. There are a few things here. I can't believe it's taken 3 years. This happened in February 2020. I can't even believe this man has now been sentenced now, last Friday I think it was, that jailed. He was actually in jail already for burglary, the perpetrator. What does it say about us? Well, firstly, let's think about what that 20-year-old woman has gone through. It's taken 3 years for this guy to be put in jail for this crime. What does it say about our society that... Are we too scared or are we just too uncaring? I hope it's that we're too scared to intervene and not that we're that uncaring. I don't know what you think, Emily, but...
I've been astonished in recent years by how short sentences are, Michael, for severe sexual assault, like in this case. 9 years in prison with a further 5 on licence. Clearly, if you were brazen enough and evil, in my view, to rape a young woman on a train, in a train carriage, surely that should be a longer sentence. Is sentencing too weak when it comes to sexual assault?
I'm not an expert on this. I mean, I think we need to... I suppose what I can say is what are we talking about when we say we want a sentence to be long? Now, I think what is shown is that longer sentences aren't a good deterrent. So no one says, I'm not going to commit a crime because I might be in for 12 years instead of 9 years. What longer sentences do is they keep people off the streets for longer. Then you've got the issue of age. So obviously it is the case that people are most likely to commit crimes when they're a young adult, essentially. So is there any point in keeping people into jail into their late 50s and 60s? I think there are lots of discussions to have here, but I think it should be evidence-based. I think it is a concern when sort of we make minimum sentences based on single stories and then a political outrage, because then we end up putting people
I take your
behind
point,
bars
but
for
why
longer than they
didn't
need to be.
Sorry, why can we just go back to my point? Why didn't anyone stop this man? Why didn't anyone... I just think about, like, the older generations. My father, if he saw a woman being hurt, he would have intervened. How can we sit here and talk about a woman being raped in a tube train? What's it got to do with sentencing? The woman was being raped by an attacker. Why did no one stop him?
I can only imagine people felt petrified, frozen. But that is the most generous interpretation.
Do we know how many people were on the train? Did they say a busy train or was it an empty train?
I've seen reports that it was a busy carriage, which makes it even more... Well, I don't know if it
we
makes
do
it
know
more
there was
bizarre,
no CCTV, which is one of the big problems here, and perhaps an argument for CCTV on every tube carriage train. But
this does also lead to... So I think the evidence on sentences and deterrence is very weak. The evidence on chances of getting caught and deterrence is very strong. So if you think you're going to get caught immediately, that does reduce crime to quite a significant degree.
Yeah, but it is rather frightening for women using public transport to hear stories like this. Absolutely horrifying. But shall we move on?
I suppose there's just one further thing I'd add, that on the flip side, of course, last night, the Member of Parliament, David Davis, did intervene in a case, not of sexual assault, but of assault, where 2 men were beating up a homeless man on the floor who wasn't fighting back, who was defenceless. And Guto Hari, the former Director of Communications for Number 10, and David Davis, of course, former Brexit Secretary, former member of the SAS, which I suppose helps when it comes to intervening, intervened. I'd like to think I would have intervened, but thinking to myself, I don't know if I would have done. Walking down a street, night, 2 men beating someone up, would I have tried to cross the road or would I have intervened? It's such a difficult position to put myself in.
Of course, and as a man on your own, why would you necessarily feel able to take on 2 other men beating up some? You know, I mean, the dynamics of that. I just feel so appalled about a woman being attacked and raped in public and no one intervening. I feel something's gone very wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it would appear that way. Do we have time for one last story?
Gosh, it feels like a bit of a gear change.
It does feel like a bit of a gear change, but still a very important issue. The right to work from home. It is creeping up upon us. You'll be able to ask your employer very soon for flexibility. What do you think of this, Emma? Do you think we've become a little bit too reclusive? We all want to work at home?
Look, I think we need to work out as a society where we stand on working from home, because we're still building loads of offices which are mostly sort of empty and not being sold. Some people say it's far more productive, you get loads done. Some people say you're absolute skivers, you know, civil servants wanting to skive off, get 5 days pay for 4 days work, that kind of thing. Loads of jobs you can't, manual jobs, menial work, low-skilled work, you can't. You have to go to work. Television, you have to go to work. I think we need to work out, is it more productive, is it not? And then go with that.
Michael, why should there be a right? Surely companies, if they think it's good, will give the right, and others that think it's bad won't. And you know what? The one that's most productive, those companies will be the successful ones.
Well, it's the right to ask for it, isn't it? So I presume what that means is that the company, if they're not going to give you some of the week at home, have to explain why. So clearly, if you're in the construction industry, they'll say, no, we've got good reason. But if you work in admin and they say, well, we want you in 2 times a week for meetings.
Right, Michael Walker, Emma Wolf, thank you very much. Stay with us. This is Good Afternoon Britain.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Another dull and damp afternoon for the southeast of England. Brighter skies elsewhere, but with blustery showers towards the northwest. We've got a weak weather front moving through. That's bringing a lot of low cloud and some outbreaks of mostly light rain and drizzle, and that will settle upon East Anglia and the southeast for the afternoon. So largely cloudy. Some outbreaks of rain here. Elsewhere, brightening skies after a grey start. Some sunny spells coming through. But for the north and west of Scotland and for parts of Northern Ireland, it will be windy with showers moving in. Now, where we've got the sunny spells in the west, temperatures reaching the double figures, but it will feel on the chilly side towards the southeast where we keep the low cloud, and that lingers for a time into the evening. Later on, it does clear, and there will be some mist and fog forming across southern and eastern parts of England, South Wales. A touch of frost in places here as well, with lighter winds, but with more of a wind further north and thicker cloud moving in, I think it will largely be frost and fog free to begin things on Friday. A bright start for many, but increasingly cloudy across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and some high cloud moving in across England and Wales as well. So not entirely sunny. The best of the bright weather this time will be in the southeast, increasingly wet and windy towards the northwest.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth. It's on your teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of December. Coming up this hour.
Home Office failure. Less than 1% of those arriving on small boats since 2020 have been deported. That's according to new government figures. All the while, many of the rest languish in expensive accommodation. The cost of the Bibby Stockholm barge has been revealed for the first time at an astonishing £41,000 a day.
The search continues. It's been nearly a week since 55-year-old mum Gaynor Lord vanished after leaving work in Norwich. Fresh CCTV footage has been released showing a frantic Gaynor rushing through the city centre and dodging traffic. We're on the scene as the search operation enters its 6th day.
Not another one. Rishi Sunak is braced for yet another by-election as the Parliamentary Standards Committee recommends an extraordinary 35-day suspension for former Tory MP Scott Benton. If approved by the House, that is grounds for a recall petition.
Now we'll get to all of that, including getting to the bottom of that shockingly low deportation figure after we get to the headlines with Sophia.
Tom, it's 1 minute past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has held the interest rate at 5.25% for the 3rd time in a row amid signs of potential economic challenges. It comes as a Monetary Policy Committee have previously raised the interest rate for 14 consecutive meetings until it reached a 15-year high of 5.25%. At Parliament's Treasury Committee last month, the bank's governor said the threat of UK inflation is being underestimated. But the Prime Minister says progress has been made.
I've made a bunch of decisions, making sure that we don't borrow too much money, making sure that we're responsible with the public finances so that we can get inflation down. It doesn't happen by accident, and the contrast is quite clear. You've got the Labour Party saying they want to borrow £28 billion a year on this green spending spree. All that's going to do is push up people's taxes, push up mortgage rates. We want to get them down, and that's why in January we're starting to cut people's taxes as well. That will help put more money in people's pockets starting at the beginning of January. So look, I think we are making progress. There's more to do, but the economy has certainly turned a corner.
Shadow Business and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says the government should not take credit for halving inflation.
Inflation target for the United Kingdom is 2%. Inflation coming down is really to do with some of those global pressures changing, supply chains adjusting to what we've seen. And I think people will look at it and say, well, when inflation rose so significantly, the government said nothing to do with us, it's the war in Ukraine, it's these global pressures, and when those recede they want the credit for it coming down. I don't think the British people will be convinced of that case.
2 nurses from Blackpool are facing prison sentences after they were found guilty for sedating patients. 54-year-old Catherine Hudson has been given 7 years and 2 months for drugging patients during work shifts at Blackpool Victoria Hospital. The incidents occurred between 2017 and 2018. Her 48-year-old colleague, Charlotte Wilmot, was found guilty of encouraging Hudson to drug a patient and sentenced to 3 years. Sentencing judge described the healthcare workers as wicked and pure evil. A second probe into South Wales Police has been launched by a watchdog following a crash in Cardiff. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans died after the bike they were riding crashed in Ely in May. The new investigation is focused on complaints made by the boys' families. It's separate from another investigation into the interactions of officers with the teenagers before their deaths. It's the 6th day in the search for a missing woman who was last seen in Norwich city centre. Gaynor Lord was last spotted on CCTV cameras on Friday afternoon. Norfolk Constabulary says it is likely the 55-year-old may have entered the water, and underwater search teams have scoured the river. Miss Lord's belongings, including clothing and a mobile phone, were found in a park near her workplace. The head of a lobbying trade association says the findings against Scott Benton show the need for reform of the lobbying system. It comes as the Committee on Standards recommended Scott Benton be suspended for 35 days from the Commons following a lobbying scandal. The Blackpool South MP was filmed offering to leak confidential information to gambling industry chiefs. Mr Benton was secretly being filmed by reporters for The Times, who offered him between £2,000 and £4,000 for 2 days' work. The MP says he didn't breach any rules. The father, stepmother and uncle of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif have pleaded not guilty to her murder. The 10-year-old's body was discovered at her home in Surrey in August. The day before Sarah was discovered, the 3 defendants left the UK for Pakistan with 5 children before returning a month later. The trial of all 3 will be in September next year. The UK is banning entry for those responsible for settler violence against Palestinians. Foreign Secretary David Cameron says the ban follows similar measures introduced by the EU. It comes as UN figures show settler attacks in the Israeli-occupied West Bank have more than doubled since Hamas attacked Israel in October. The UK has signed an international treaty with Japan and Italy to develop a new generation of stealth fighter jets. The deal will aim to build military planes with supersonic capability. The headquarters for the Global Combat Air Programme will be based in the UK. The planes will take to the skies in 2035. The funeral for the former Minister Baroness Kinnock is taking place. The family of the MEP and wife of ex-Labour leader Lord Kinnock says she was a proud democratic socialist who campaigned for justice against poverty. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2017. Sir Keir Starmer described her as a true fighter for the Labour Party. He was seen arriving at the funeral earlier, followed by Gordon Brown, Tony Blair and Sadiq Khan. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Now to the appalling state of our asylum system. Only 1% of migrants who have arrived in small boats...
Small boats, sorry, I think your mic is down. Small boats since 2020 have been deported. Only 1% of migrants who arrive in small boats since 2020 have been deported. That's according to new figures. And just 95% of Albanian migrants have been sent back, despite the UK having a separate returns agreement with the country, which is rather curious because the government often talks about how many Albanians have been sent back to Albania.
Yeah.
Now, the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says the figures show more truly shocking Tory asylum failure. So, the Conservative MP and Home Affairs Select Committee member Tim Loughton joins us now. Tim, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Hi, Tim. Are you as shocked as we are to find out that less than 1% of small boat arrivals have been deported since 2020?
I don't think shocked is the right word. I think exasperated. We had just in the last couple of weeks, when we interviewed the senior civil servants from the Home Office, to find that in the last year more than 17,000 applications by asylum seekers had been withdrawn, and they didn't know where they are. So we've got a problem about a shortage of those who failed their asylum claims or are not pursuing them actually leaving the country, and then we're not really sure where those who don't have a claim for asylum pending or have had it rejected are still in the country, but we don't know exactly where they are and what they're doing. The only bit of good news is that the rate at which the asylum applications are now being processed and the backlog being dealt with has risen considerably, which is great. But those people who failed to have a credible asylum claim then need to leave the country, and clearly that is not happening at nearly the pace it needs to happen.
Why is it happening at such a low rate compared to comparable countries in Europe? Is it that we don't have a place to send these people to? Or frankly, is it that the cases that we build are far too shoddy in the first place?
Well, to be fair, there are many other European countries faced with even larger figures who are really struggling to deport those people who don't have a claim that is upheld. And this is why the Rwanda deal, which is a part, not the be-all and end-all, but a part of the government's migration strategy, is so important, because in many cases those people that we are struggling to deport are from countries where they are it's virtually impossible to return them to. So hence having a third country, Rwanda, so that they will hopefully be deterred from coming across the channel in the first place, is an important way of making sure those people who do not have a credible asylum claim and know that once they make it into British territorial waters, they could be here for the foreseeable, that there's an alternative way of dealing with them that will deter them from coming across the channel at all in the first place.
Tim, I'm a bit confused here. Is it that the Home Office is failing to make decisions quickly on asylum claims, or is it because those who aren't deemed to have a legitimate asylum claim are not being deported because of legal appeals through the court system? What is holding it up? Because it's quite extraordinary that only 1,182 of over 110,000 have actually been deported. The government has such strong rhetoric when it comes to illegal migration, and yet we seem to be far better at dishing out visas than we are about deporting those who don't have legitimate claim to be here.
Well, it's a combination of all of those things. But as I said earlier, actually the government has speeded up and got much more effective at processing those claims. Of those claims, though, there are this year a much larger amount who seem to have had their claims upheld, a much larger amount who have then withdrawn their claims or had them withdrawn, but then we don't know where they are, and then only a small amount who have been returned. The real problem at the end of the day, Emily, is that it is quite difficult to return people to certain countries, and particularly those countries from which the major nationalities are coming across the channel at the moment, which is why you have got to do something that diverts them from coming across the channel and then being able to pursue their claims in the UK if they do not have a credible claim. We are bringing in these safe and legal route options next year, which is right for those genuine asylum seekers, genuinely fleeing danger and persecution, who have a credible case of coming to the UK. It's right that we do that, which means there is no excuse then to pay people smugglers to come across the channel in the most dangerous way possible when you don't really have any credible claim to be in the UK. And it's the small amount of people, and those numbers have reduced, fortunately, but we need to reduce them far, far more, and that's why the Rwanda scheme is an important part of that deterrent.
And yet the Rwanda scheme, critics of it would say that it will only take a few hundred potential people who cross in small boats. That could be one day's arrival, fills up the entire scheme. Is it your understanding, having scrutinised those who work in the Home Office yesterday, that this scheme is perhaps larger than we're being told, or is it really only a couple of hundred places?
Let's be clear, the Rwanda scheme is uncapped. But the Rwanda scheme is there and won't be judged on the basis of how many hundreds or thousands of people we send to Rwanda for whether it's successful. It will be judged on how fewer the numbers are coming across the channel, because it's become a lottery as to whether you end up in a hotel in Kent or on a plane back to Rwanda. And why do I think that that will be a deterrent? Well, when the Home Affairs Select Committee went to Calais earlier this year, we saw all the people involved in the operation of stopping the boats and the migration system over there. And what they told us very clearly was, when the government announced the Rwanda scheme, first of all, in May, I think it was, of last year, they saw a surge of migrants from Calais approaching the French authorities about trying to regularise their status in France, because they didn't want to risk being sent to Rwanda. The trouble is, of course, the scheme literally hasn't got off the ground yet, so that deterrent has evaporated. If we can start this scheme, a very clear message will go out, is that don't even bother to come across the channel, because you're going to end up on a plane to Rwanda. That will cut the numbers very considerably. I've no doubt about that. And then we can really work on looking after those people with a genuine assignment claim, and absolutely clamping down on those still using the boats who don't have any credible claim to come to the UK and are gaming the system and the generosity of the British taxpayer.
And Tim, just very quickly while we've got you, it's been revealed the cost of the Bibi Stockholm barge, £22.5 million. That's effectively £41,000 a day that the taxpayer is expected to stump up for this. Do you get the impression that the Home Office, the government, may give up on the policy of barges simply because the costs are out of control and there have been so many issues?
Well, I don't know, but the reason they've looked at barges, and they are looking and bringing online former military bases, ex-detention centres and others, is because cramming more and more people into hotels around the country is not a sustainable option. It's completely wrecking the tourist market. You've got several towns that got a real concentration of these hotels, and it's not the most appropriate long-term accommodation, particularly when you've got children and families as well. So it's not that they want to do this. We've got to look at other alternatives. Now, the numbers of hotels being used are coming down. We need absolutely to scrutinise the amount of money that the Bibi Stockholm is going to cost. But barges are used in other countries. We were in Belgium a few weeks ago. They're using barges over there. Other countries do as well. It's a question of, you have to accommodate people somewhere once they come across the channel. So the solution is make sure every deterrent is in force to prevent them coming across the channel in the first place, on top of working with the French police to intercept more of them on French beaches. The trouble is, the French, when they intercept them, don't then arrest them, or they won't intercept the boats once in the water and bring the passengers back to French shores, when they would have paid €3,000-4,000 for a round trip to people smugglers, and that would absolutely kill that trade. If the French were to change their practice, we wouldn't have this problem at all.
Well, Tim Loughton, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest there. Interesting that so much of this problem of not being able to deport people is about where they come from in the first place, perhaps being difficult to deport to those specific countries. It does make the case in a pretty powerful way for having a third country like Rwanda as an option.
Not enough answers, in my view. But anyway, in the last few minutes, police in Norwich gave an update on the search for missing mother of three, Gaynor Lord, who went missing almost 1 week ago. Let's have a listen to what Chief Superintendent Dave Buckley had to say.
On the investigation so far?
OK, so the investigation at the moment still focused very much on the river. Our working hypothesis remains that Gaynor is in the river, even though we're exploring other lines, as you'd expect us to keep a very open mind. That's why you've seen quite considerable intensive searches of the river today. Specialist team from Lincolnshire is also assisting us, so we're putting very equipment across the river at the moment, which is quite detailed in allowing us to try and target divers to where we think there may be objects. But equally, it's very, very challenging. The river is very, very full of water due to all the rain, full of lots of debris. The divers can see about 1 foot in front of them, so it's an extraordinarily challenging environment for them to work in. So it's slow, methodical at the moment, working with the equipment, and it will take probably a couple of days to get to a position where we're kind of content with what we've done. It may even be longer.
What makes you so convinced that she's in the water?
So at the moment we're looking, obviously, like I said, an open mind. So there's a number of lines of inquiry that we are pursuing. But at the moment, everything that we know is pointing to a high probability that Gaynor went into the water. And that would be from the CCTV, from the very limited witnesses that we've got available to us at the moment, and other lines of inquiry that we're pursuing about Gaynor's behaviour in the lead up to her disappearance. So at the moment the river is a really key factor for us. Now it's not to say that other specialist police teams aren't working on other lines of inquiry, because they are, but at the moment you're seeing that intensive effort around the searching of the water and the parks around and some of the other land around this area.
I was going to say, we saw some of your search teams today across the road. They'd actually left the park, crossed the road and gone to some sort of scrubland, wasteland near some houses. Why have you decided to go over there?
So the specialist search police teams are here. They're Norfolk Constabulary's own teams, and we're just being really, really thorough. So each day we look at what we've undertaken, and then there's certain areas that we would research again, depending on what we might have found, and just want to be absolutely sure that we're missing nothing in terms of evidence. Not just for Gaynor herself, but any evidence that may have been dropped, lost, whatever. We just need to be sure that we've covered all the ground.
You released some CCTV footage yesterday from Gaynor leaving work. You can see her on CCTV leaving work, and she looks like she's smiling.
Yes.
Then you see her going through various roads in Norwich city centre.
Yeah.
She looks like she's in a bit of a hurry. What is that CCTV telling you? There's also a half-hour period where you think she went into the cathedral grounds. So what is the CCTV telling you?
At the moment, the CCTV is telling us that she left work and she made her way over a period of time to the river where she was seen. Nobody's seen her go into the river, nobody's seen her into the water, but we know that she ended up in the park. At the moment, there's nothing else that the CCTV is showing us about who she may have spoken to, any interactions she might have had. It is literally the journey that you've seen so far that we've put out.
That's release of CCTV. Yeah. Has it yielded any lines that you're following?
No, not at the moment, no.
But she left work early. Do you know the reason for that?
No, we don't, no. I mean, some of this behaviour is out of character. We can't explain some of her behaviour that day, and we're working really closely with the family, with friends, with anybody else that we know that may have had contact with her in recent days and weeks to try and understand why this may have happened.
And what have her family and friends said about her?
I think we're supporting the friends and family as close as we can. I think people are very shocked by what's happened. Nobody knows why she's done what she's done, and we will just have to work and see if we can find it out.
Some parallels are being drawn to the tragic case of Nicola Bulley up in Lancashire. Are there any lessons that have been learnt from that case that you're now applying to this investigation here in Norfolk?
I think so. So in the case of Lancashire, of course, we'll always learn from jobs that have happened before. In terms of Lancashire, we've reached out to them, to one of the investigators that worked on that case, found out anything that we can learn, and we will apply it. But at the moment, I'm not concerned. I think we're doing everything we can to progress this inquiry.
And are you in contact with the force up there who led the investigation into Nicola Bulley's disappearance?
Yes, we are.
Are they helping you?
Yes, they are helping us. And actually, when that case was concluded, the College of Policing, along with the National Crime Agencies, have to do an awful lot of work to then look at what can be learned, what can be applied, and it may be in terms of search tactics, it may be in terms of even how the police interact and deal with asking the public for help, and all of that we then reapply in our own inquiries.
And finally, for me, this is still a missing persons inquiry.
It remains a missing person inquiry, yes.
What is your message to somebody who might have any information about where Gaynor is?
Well, we've had 30 members of the public come forward so far as a result of all the work and press that we've put out. I would just encourage anybody who's seen anything, however insignificant it may be, to call into the police and tell us what you know, because every piece of information will help. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Others might have questions.
Well, there we go. Chief Superintendent Dave Buckley giving updates on that investigation, still being treated as a missing person investigation with a high probability that Gaynor went into the water. Let's reflect on all that now with Theo Chikomba, our national news reporter on the scene. Theo, what did you make of what the detective had to say?
Yes, well, interestingly, he mentioned that 30 people have come forward, members of the public, with some evidence over the last couple of days, and that will help them to continue what they are investigating here at the moment. But he did confirm that underwater investigations are continuing. We've seen some of those specialist officers who are working with Norfolk Police, and some of that team from Lincolnshire Police have been here since yesterday. And of course, those efforts are continuing continuing. Just to my left here, officers are working on the ground as well, going through some of the bushes, going through some of the grass and area in this area, and they're continuing to look for anything that might help them in this investigation. And of course, it remains to be seen what happened since last week. It's been almost 6 days now since she was reported missing on Friday evening after she had finished her shift at work. She left early, just over an hour early, when she was due to finish at 4 p.m. But of course, their working hypothesis remains that she may have gone into the water.
Thank you very much indeed, Theo Chikomba there, our national reporter who is at the scene. Now, the Bank of England has held the base rate of interest for a third consecutive time. It's remaining at 5.25%.
Yes, but Andrew Bailey, the bank's governor, has indicated that cuts are still unlikely in the coming months, as there's still a way to go in efforts to get down inflation.
So, joining us now in the studio is Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, who's no longer in front, he's with On the Money. There we go, Liam. No construction site behind you this time. You've got the air. Is it true that we're likely to see interest rates hold for the foreseeable?
Well, that's certainly the impression the Bank of England wants to give, unlike the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, that's signalling yesterday it held rates, but signalling that rates will be coming down soon. Inflation in the US, though, is lower than here. It's 3.1% on the latest numbers, and it's 4.6% here in the UK. Look, financial markets don't actually believe the Bank of England. Financial markets, if you look at the weight of money on money markets, in the futures market, traders making bets on where interest rates are going to go, financial markets think that interest rates will fall from their current rate of 5.25%, where they've been since August, sometime in the spring or early summer. If you look at the futures markets, we're looking at interest rates of 4.25% from the Bank of England by this time next year, which was much, much lower than the Bank of England is signalling. I think what's going on here is there's a credibility issue. Because the Bank of England allowed inflation to go so high, inflation peaked at over 11% back in October last year, they have a bit of a credibility problem. They were slow to really get moving with raising interest rates to tackle inflation. So now maybe they're overdoing it, looking like kind of hard nuts on inflation. And unbelievably, I didn't get to tell you last time because, as you say, there were pneumatic drills surrounding me outside the Bank of England. Emily, even with my big booming voice, I couldn't speak over them, could I? But if you look at the minutes of the Monetary Policy Committee, the 9 economists at the Bank of England who set interest rates 8 times a year, the minutes are split 6-3 in terms of voting. What does that mean? It means 6 of the economists on the committee, including the governor, voted for rates to stay at 5.25%. There was some speculation rates may actually fall because the economy has been contracting. But guess what? The other 3 members of the Monetary Policy Committee, they voted for rates to go up even more.
Really?
Wow.
Oh,
wow. I mean, unbelievably, they're sort of really posturing, we're really hard, we're the Bank of England, and we may raise interest rates again because we were so useless at doing it before, which allowed inflation to go so much higher than elsewhere. Look, it's a game. Central banking is a very, 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 very important game. It's a game of credibility. It's a game of fate, if you like. And because the Bank of England was slow to get going raising rates, and because inflation in the UK was higher than many other major economies, largely because of high energy prices, by the way, but also because, in my view, the Bank of England fell asleep at the wheel for a while, the Bank of England is now posturing and saying we could yet raise rates again, so watch out.
And it's interesting that those 3 economists who wanted to raise rates, did they miss the news that the economy contracted in the last quarter? I would have thought that would be a pretty big wake-up call, that perhaps time to sort of ease off a little bit.
You'd think so, wouldn't you, Tom? Of course, the news yesterday, GDP was contracting, the economy was contracting, so you'd think if you lower interest rates, it's easier to borrow, it's easier for consumers with big mortgages, get the economy moving again. But no, they want to raise rates, which makes life even more difficult for hard-pressed firms and households. This is what I was talking about. It's about credibility. The Bank of England is only meant to target inflation. It's not meant to worry about growth. And those three economists were signalling, we really are not worried about growth. We're only worried about getting inflation down. But look, the situation is this. The way the Bank of England, what it's done today, sort of meshes into politics. It's clear that the economy, while resilient, is going through a tough patch. But as interest rates come down, and I personally think the first move down will be in either April or May, rather than on current evidence. As interest rates come down, as inflation comes down, there should be a feel-good factor. Consumers with mortgages should feel a little bit of easing. Firms with big debts should feel a little bit of easing. They may take on more debts and invest some more. The economy should get moving as inflation falls and interest rates come down. That will take months and months and months. But the longer the Tories can wait, as long as Rishi Sunak doesn't get blown up by his own backbench MPs in some kind of confidence vote about immigration or something else, if he can hang in there, I think they're going to play the long game and go for an election in the autumn or even, you know, sort of December next year or something like that. Because on current evidence, Tom and Emily, the economy will gradually pull out of the current situation that it's in. The feel-good factor will gradually take hold. At least if you're a Tory, fingers and toes crossed, that will happen.
And yet, Liam, of course, you've worked as a economic and political reporter as well. Back in 1997, the Tories went into that election with growth at 4%, with inflation at decades-long lows. The economy was going gangbusters, and they lost by a huge degree anyway.
Tom, you keep telling me things that happened but when you were a sort of fetus or you weren't even born. It's quite incredible. You should have got out more as a toddler stage rather than reading my copy in the Financial Times. No, look, you're completely right. What happened in 1997? There was a Labour landslide. Tony Blair swept all before him. The Tories were reduced to 164 seats. A lot of people think they could be reduced to 120 or even 100 seats these days from currently 350 or so. That was Tony Blair's inheritance. The legacy of the Conservatives was to leave New Labour, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, with an economy that was recovering, an economy where a lot of the tough stuff in terms of fiscal consolidation and getting the public finances back in order had been done, and New Labour and the country as a whole were able to benefit from that, but it certainly wasn't the Tories who took the credit. Look, I think we're in a different position. I'm not saying the Tories may not lose to the same extent that John Major's Tories did in 1997. I'm not saying that at all. That could happen. But I do think there are differences. I don't think Starmer has as much electoral appeal as Blair did back in the day. So I don't think the Tories are going to go to quite the kind of low depths that they did after 1997. And also, I would say, and I say this with regret, the public finances are in much, much worse shape now than they were in the mid to late 1990s. National debt is far, far higher. The national debt was 30-odd% of GDP at the turn of this century. It's now 100% of GDP, bar the shouting. And on many estimates, in the medium term, certainly, it's trending upwards. So I think whoever comes in to office after the next general election, there will not be a lot of money to spend. And that's why I think politics is going to continue to get more combative. There's going to be kind of less light, a lot more noise and venom, if you like, in politics, because the public finances for the foreseeable future will be tight.
Well, that's dampened my my Christmas spirit a tad, the debt that we've accrued. But thank you very much, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Now, in just one moment, we'll be speaking to the former head of the British Army as he calls on the government to scrap its Rwanda scheme. We'll ask why. First, the headlines with Sophia.
Thank you, Emily. It's 2:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. It's the sixth day in the search for a missing woman who was last seen in Norwich city centre. Gaynor Lord was last spotted on CCTV cameras on Friday afternoon. Norfolk Constabulary says it's likely the 55-year-old may have entered the water, and underwater search teams have scoured the river. Miss Lord's belongings, including clothing and a mobile phone, were found in a park near her workplace. Chief Superintendent Dave Buckley from Norfolk Constabulary says the focus is on the river.
So there's a number of lines of inquiry that we are pursuing, but at the moment everything that we know is pointing to a high probability that Gaynor went into the water. And that would be from the CCTV, from the very limited witnesses that we've got available to us at the moment, and other lines of inquiry that we're pursuing about Gaynor's behaviour in the lead up to her disappearance. So at the moment the river is a really key factor for us. Now it's not to say that other specialist police teams aren't working on other lines of inquiry, because they are, but at the moment you're seeing that intensive effort around the searching of the water and the parks around and some of the other land around this area.
2 nurses from Blackpool are facing prison sentences after they were found guilty for sedating patients. 54-year-old Catherine Hudson has been given 7 years and 2 months for drugging patients during work shifts at Blackpool Victoria Hospital. The incidents occurred between 2017 and 2018. Her 48-year-old colleague, Charlotte Wilmot, was found guilty of encouraging Hudson to drug a patient and sentenced to 3 years. The funeral for the former minister, Baroness Kinnock, is taking place. The family of the MEP and wife of ex-Labour leader Lord Kinnock says she was a proud democratic socialist who campaigned for justice and against poverty. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2017. Sir Keir Starmer described her as a true fighter for the Labour Party. He was seen arriving at the funeral earlier, followed by Gordon Brown, Tony Blair and Sadiq Khan. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
Now, the former head of the British Army has joined Gary Lineker and the actor Brian Cox among the celebrities and high-profile public figures who decided to sign a letter calling for the UK government to scrap its Rwanda scheme.
Yes, Lord Richard Dannett said that the government's dogged pursuit of the unpopular plan to send people seeking protection to Rwanda is astonishing, and described a failure to fully support Afghans fleeing the Taliban as shameful. Well, we're delighted to say that Lord Richard Dannett is with us now, and I suppose there's one big question that sits across all of this. We're seeing how hard it is for the government to stop the boats and even to deport people who are here illegally, without a third country to send people to. How does it control British borders?
Well, there's a whole range of ways that they can control the border if they put their mind to it. The focus on Rwanda is totally distorting the whole debate. Look at Rwanda as a country on its own. It's a country that's had a president who has been there for many years. Some could call it a dictatorship. It's a country that is still in the aftermath of the terrible genocide of the 1990s. It's a country that I've visited. It's not a country I would wish to spend much more time in. I have a number of Rwandan friends, and they're appalled at the prospect of this. Now, if the government really wants to crack down on the migration, illegal migration, and stop the boats, there's a whole raft of things it could be doing, and not just focusing on this abjectly awful policy of focusing on Rwanda. There's a much wider number of initiatives that could be followed.
Lord Dannett, do you agree with the government that those crossing by small boats are illegal immigrants?
Yes, they are. I mean, there are many ways that you can come to this country legally, and crossing in a small boat is an illegal way of doing it. Now we're talking about the boats. I think we should be having a much more robust conversation with the French. The French could be doing much more to stop the boats taking to the water in the first place. They could be patrolling their beaches, they could be patrolling their shoreline far more and turning boats back and stop boats getting into the water. Furthermore, our own government should be increasing massively the resources that it puts into processing asylum applications, making much swifter decisions on who should stay and who should not stay. It's not to say that all immigration is bad. Of course, it's not. We know that there are many gaps in our own labour market. But deciding more quickly who should be here and who should not be here, and closing down the illegal routes, cracking down on the people smuggling gangs, this is where our government, with our European friends, should be really bearing down, and not on this frankly unpleasant and highly dubious policy of sending what will be just a small number of people to Rwanda.
Should we not take into account the words of the Supreme Court, which found, of course, that the policy was unlawful, but in the detail of that decision, they didn't say it was unlawful because Paul Kagame has been in power for 20 years. They didn't say it was unlawful because 30 years ago there was an awful genocide in the country. They said it was unlawful on the grounds of one specific issue, which was refoulement, however we want to pronounce it. The idea that people might be then deported from Rwanda to the country from which they fled in the first place. The new treaty the government has signed with Rwanda makes that illegal. Is that not addressing the Supreme Court's concerns? And therefore, does it not, to some extent, address yours?
To an extent, it does. I mean, when you've got obstacles in your way, you've got problems to be solved. The government has found a way to try and get round the issue of starting their Rwanda policy. I put it back in the wider context and ask the question, is this really the best the government can do to set up a deportation scheme to a country like Rwanda? Go back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. Are there not many more ways that effort and money and resources could be put into to more legally stop the illegal migration into this country?
Lord Dannett, do you accept that we need a form of deterrent? You say Rwanda is not the country. Would there be another country, potentially, that might suit you more with your arguments?
Well, just think about a robust conversation with the French government. If on one day we returned to France all those who had come across in small boats, that would ruin the business plan of the traffic smugglers at a stroke. Why don't we consider that? Much less controversial than taking people reluctantly to a country in Africa and leaving them there.
Of course, the French say they won't sign a returns agreement with us. Doesn't that sound a bit like wishful thinking? I was over at the Élysée Palace in February with the Prime Minister when he had the British-French conference, the first one in several years. They signed agreements on beach patrols, signed agreements on a new centre being built with British money in northern France. But the one thing the French would not agree to was a returns agreement.
Well, in which case that's something that we should continue talking to our French friends about. Why should we just blithely accept those who have been allowed to come across the channel? Go back to something I was saying before. Why are the French not being more vigorous in patrolling the dunes leading up to the beaches themselves, patrolling their own water? Frankly, there is a view that actually it's quite convenient to the French to offload all these people on their beaches coming to this country. So a more robust conversation with the French would be one of the things that certainly I would be pressing much more hard that we should be doing. The Rwanda issue is going to be a small-scale issue. It's supposed to be a deterrent. I'm not sure how much of a deterrent it will be. And it's completely muddling the whole issue, which is a really important issue of controlling total migration into this country.
Yeah, I mean, it would be ideal if we had an agreement in place with the French, but it doesn't seem like any of our government's attempts have borne fruit yet. But thank you very much indeed for your time, Lord Richard Dannett, who has co-signed this letter to the government asking them to ditch the Rwanda plan altogether.
What if we promised to just buy loads of cheese?
It's not going to happen, is it?
What if we promised to wear berets?
I mean, we sent hundreds of millions.
What if we promised to have onions round our necks and change our national dress to stripy black and white T-shirts? I mean, would that...
Tom, that's not very PC to make such stereotypes of the French. But anyway, coming up, let us know what you think about that. Would you have signed that letter to the government saying scrap the Rwanda plan altogether? It is coming up against many an obstacle. But Southwest Airlines, get this, is to grant plus-sized passengers extra seats for free. Do we as a society reward obesity? We'll be posing that question to our panel after the break.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new t-shirt.
It's your new t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, what's the state of the economy? The Bank of England has decided to hold that interest rate at 5.25%, but I'm joined by the economist Justin Urquhart-Stewart and Novara Media's contributing editor Michael Walker to discuss this. Justin, you're an economist. Tell us what this means for the state of the economy. Are we going to be having a miserable Christmas?
You're going to have a slightly more optimistic view. The economy is still in a bad position. However, the very fact that the Bank of England says, right, that's it, we're at the top now. We didn't precisely say that, but they are in a position where they haven't put it up any further. But this actually goes against the whole idea of having interest rates going up. You do that to slow down, particularly, say, consumer spending, which is rather hot. Well, hang on a second. Consumer spending has been incredibly weak. This whole idea of putting up interest rates will actually then bring down inflation. Well, only when it gets into the pay levels, which it is now, you can now understand why you would put rates up. But also this rush to actually putting rates up so quickly, it takes a year to 18 months to actually have a real effect of that. So, in my view, I'm afraid they've had the wrong policy for all of this. There's a phrase I nicked off Liam, actually, with regard to anybody at the moment. It's a bit like a man who owns a hammer. Everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
So as far as the Bank of England is concerned, inflation, put interest rates up. But this is one of the problems. That's not. There are other tools they could use So, unfortunately, our...
Well, we did try some other tools for a time. For 49 days, we had a different Prime Minister who tried to use the tool of boosting the supply side of the economy, which is another way in which you can bring down inflation. Obviously, she wasn't given much of a chance to do so, but might that have been a better path?
Well, if it had been actually carried out in the right sort of way, possibly. We all want growth. What we've got to do is bring out a credible policy which people will believe, and probably checked by the checkers to make sure it's right, and then you'll get some credibility. The damage of that wasn't so much in terms of inflation, it was our international reputation. What's this country doing?
I mean, Michael, now, I don't imagine that you're a fan of Liz Truss, but I was thinking with Tom earlier in the show, I was thinking, you know, the government, they're 20 points behind Labour. An election isn't too far off. Why don't they just throw the kitchen sink at economic growth and just make some bold moves? I think they're a bit scared following what happened with Liz Truss.
Well, I suppose what would those moves for economic growth look like? It doesn't seem like they've got a coalition that can let that happen. And I think this links actually to this discussion of, are we going to have a terrible Christmas? Because it really depends on who you are. So if you are a homeowner and you've paid off your mortgage, then the fact that interest rates are high doesn't matter so much. The fact that wages are stagnant doesn't matter so much. There are also 140,000 kids in temporary accommodation. So for those people, it really will matter. And I think that's where this Liz Truss issue comes in, because, I mean, she also used a very blunt instrument, which was tax cuts, especially for businesses, and that will bring about productivity.
Reforms of regulation.
I suppose she didn't have the time. We didn't have the time to see that. So I'm all in favour of sort of the planning reform that I think actually the Labour Party are now at the vanguard of. The Tories weren't able to do it because they had too many NIMBYs on the backbenches. So I'm in favour of properly funding public services while going for growth. So I wouldn't go for tax cuts. I would go for deregulation in very certain sectors of the economy and then investment into green industrial strategy.
Navarra Media here calling for deregulation.
Only in very certain sectors of the economy.
You've created a coalition for growth here.
You know, Michael's
I'm a YIMBY. I'm a left YIMBY.
You're brushing off on it.
But isn't one of the problems here that the Conservative Party has, on 3 occasions in the last 12, 13 years, tried to deliver planning reform? First, Nick Boles under the coalition. Then, of course, you had the Robert Jenrick reforms that were beaten back by Theresa May in that rebellion. And then even Liz Truss tried to do this enterprise zone deregulation, planning rules being deregulated in those areas. And on every occasion, this sort of coalition of groups came to shoot it down. So might the Labour Party run into the same issue? Because there are plenty of people on the Labour Party backbenches who oppose developments for many different reasons.
Because there are other ways of actually doing this. Trying to create a national reform of planning, great, we would love to. It ain't going to happen. As you said, all these different attempts. What you do is make it locally, make it regionally, to actually push that down. You want to get more planning operations successfully, give it to those local areas. They know their area, they know the right places they want to try and develop. Do it on a nationwide basis. It's incredibly difficult. And the other issue then with tax cuts, this is why I argue with Ms Truss about that, is that we can't afford tax cuts. What you want to do is go to the source of new businesses being generated, smaller businesses. We set up more companies, small businesses in this country than France and Germany put together. So we've got the entrepreneurial spirit. We haven't got the funding necessarily, because a lot of that, you know, if you create more tax incentives like enterprise investment scheme, it doesn't cost the government anything, but it's more incentive for people to go out and invest in businesses, even attract external investment coming into Britain. So again, it's looking as though they're still looking at the old toolbox rather than some imagination.
Yeah. And we know Jeremy Hunt is quite cautious by nature, I feel.
Oh, apart from when he was running for Tory party leader and promised to slash corporation tax in half.
Yes, well, he was speaking to, you know, the crowd, trying to speak their language. But Michael, Rachel Rees, sorry, what were you
Well, I was going to say, I think this is where an
an
overly ideological approach doesn't actually help us that much. So as I say, I think deregulation in some areas to stop the NIMBYs, but at the same time, you do need a very proactive state. So when we used to build shed load of houses, it was when we built hundreds of thousands of council homes a year. There are obviously lots of countries in Europe that manage to build loads of houses without loads of council homes. But what they tend to do is have the state package up the land, and you've got a very proactive state that's making it all work, instead of what we seem to do in this country, which is just beg the house builders to build more.
Well, as a proportion of house building, we've never had so much as before the Second World War. The period where we had the most house building was entirely privately driven and was in the 1930s. And it accounted for almost all economic growth at the start of the 1930s in the UK. It's why so many houses, if you go to the outskirts of any big city, you see loads of streets of 1930s houses. It's when we had the most house building, and it was all done privately and all pretty good quality stuff. Then you have Attlee come in, who makes it illegal to build anything unless you're the state, and you have to humbly petition your local politicians to be allowed to build something on land that you own. And after that point, it's been never that high proportion.
Well, I think you've got a big problem, though, and I mean, it's unfortunate we can't put up the graph here, but if you look at when house building was very, very high, so as you say, it was quite high before the war as well, but after the war, very, very high, 50s, 60s, first half of the 70s, then it craters. And the big reason it craters is basically private sector building stays at about the same level, sort of 200,000 a year, but before that was topped up with 200,000 council homes a year. That sort of exited the scene. The idea from Thatcher was that if we stop building the council homes and the private sector will step in, the private sector didn't step in. You might say because there were too many regulations, but I would say we probably have the worst of both worlds.
People wanted to build, it's just governments have stopped them from doing so. And I do think that there is this odd thing about council housing. The UK has one of the highest levels of council housing of any developed country. In the OECD, we're 4th highest in terms of the amount of council housing we have. The problem, and the reason it feels like we've got such a shortage of council housing, is there isn't enough market rate housing, so more people need to use the council housing.
This is a question that I have, Justin. Is one of the problems in our country that our population isn't spread out very evenly? So you have a high density of demand, a high rate of demand in certain areas, not least the southeast, for example.
Yes, Phil Baby Driver.
And so it's actually quite difficult to get planning permission because there is so much housing and there's claims for what little green land is left.
So let Manchester have a good idea where they need to put their planning arrangement. Same also in Newcastle, not just houses, but infrastructure as well. If you leave it all to Westminster, I'm afraid it doesn't get the right attention. It doesn't get the verve and excitement. Let people do that locally.
But you can't magic up NHS hospitals or schools.
No, but what you can do, though,
dentists.
Encourage more people to actually be there to invest and build those
And you can fund it through land value uplift. If you were able to say we're going to grant permission to this land, suddenly the land isn't worth tuppence halfpenny. It's suddenly worth loads of money, which you can then take some of the money and fund that and put that into infrastructure. But we don't have the tools to do so currently.
But the good news is we've got now far better technology than ever before, so it doesn't matter really where you are. You look at all the technology businesses. Most of them aren't in the southeast. They're spread all over the place.
I mean, take Maidenhead, for example, in Berkshire, just outside of London. They've built huge amounts of new homes, modern flats and things, and I do wonder where the infrastructure to match is coming.
They really haven't built that much.
I think you've also got to build houses where people want to live, not build the houses and then persuade them to move there.
Also, and we've seen actually around in West London as well, properties being built up and then actually being bought by, we found the Indonesians and Singaporeans.
It's been such a fascinating conversation. We haven't even got on to campus culture. We haven't got on to airlines charging. Well, should they charge overweight people more? We've run to the end of the programme, but thank you both, Justin and Michael, for joining us. This has been Good Afternoon Britain. See you tomorrow.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Another dull and damp afternoon for the southeast of England. Brighter skies elsewhere, but with blustery showers towards the northwest. We've got a weak weather front moving through. That's bringing a lot of low cloud and some outbreaks of mostly light rain and drizzle, and that will settle upon East Anglia and the southeast for the afternoon. So largely cloudy. Some outbreaks of rain here. Elsewhere, brightening skies after a grey start, some sunny spells coming through. But for the north and west of Scotland and for parts of Northern Ireland, it will be windy with showers moving in. Now, where we've got the sunny spells in the west, temperatures reaching the double figures, but it will feel on the chilly side towards the southeast where we keep the low cloud, and that lingers for a time into the evening. Later on it does clear and there will be some mist and fog forming across southern and eastern parts of England, South Wales. A touch of frost in places here as well with lighter winds, but with more of a wind further north and thicker cloud moving in, I think it will largely be frost and fog free to begin things on Friday. A bright start for many, but increasingly cloudy across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and some high cloud moving in across England and Wales as well. So not entirely sunny. The best of the bright weather this time will be in the southeast, increasingly wet and windy towards the northwest.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Martin Daubney. Welcome to GB News. I'm here to keep you company for the next 3 hours. We've got an action-packed show ahead. Top story, Rishi Sunak clears off to Italy. His popularity at an all-time low. His Rwanda bill limped through Parliament. He's going to meet Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni. She had a great idea of building offshore containment centres in Albania. Might we have a miracle at Christmas? Might Sunak come back with a plan to stop the boats? Next story. What next for mortgages? The Bank of England held firm today at 5.25%. But what does that mean for you, for homeowners? What's the best thing to do? We'll have Liam Halligan, our economics expert, in the studio to give you the full inside skinny. Next story. What do you see here? Well, Rachel Maclean, who's a Tory MP and the Deputy Chair for Women's Rights, said this is a man in a wig. It's a Green Party candidate in the Midlands, and she got into a lot of hot water about that, but we will have an interview with her. She made the front page of the Daily Mail today, and she says, I will not be silenced by the trans bullies. And next up, a Scottish MP has put the cat amongst the pigeons by saying Tony Blair should be stripped of his knighthood. That's our big debate today. There's a Twitter poll running right now.